The hot sun seemed endless, and under the intense brightness of the sun, the traveler stopped his march. His eyes rose to such an imposing structure that his shadow seemed to challenge the same sky. There, in front of him, there was something that was not just stone or art, it was an eternal testimony of what humans could achieve when they mixed dreams, effort, and ambition. How is it possible for centuries to continue talking about these wonders? The answer is not in the stone, but in the soul of those who imagined them. In a world without modern technology, without gigantic machines, and without digital planes, these constructions challenge the laws of the possible. Each has an echo that rumbles beyond their time, a voice that whispers the greatness of the civilizations that built them. They were not simply buildings, they were statements. Declarations of faith, power, love, or, sometimes, a mixture of all of them. What motivates someone to build something so immense, so detailed, knowing that he will never see his final culmination? Perhaps the answer is in the desire to leave their mark, to make time respect its existence. It was said that there were 7, a number that for many symbolized perfection and totality. But why precisely those 7? Maybe it was the whim of a poet or the agreement between the wise of the time. The truth is that man has always had the need to classify, to give order to such a vast world full of wonders. And in that order, these 7 were recorded as the most sublime that human civilizations could offer. Not because they were the only ones, but because they had something unique, something that stopped the breath of those who saw them. The concept of wonders did not arise overnight. It was the result of a shared admiration, a kind of consensus between travelers, historians, and poets who saw in these creations something worth remembering. It didn't matter if they were in Egypt, Greece, or Babylon, they all had something in common: they challenged the limits of the imagination. And although many are no longer with us, their legacy persists, not only in books, but in the way we continue to dream of creating the impossible. In the silence of a starry night, someone could have looked towards the heights of the Great Pyramid of Giza and asked how it was possible to lift it. Or maybe, in front of the glow of the Alexandria lighthouse, a sailor felt that even in the darkest moments, there was a light that guided his way. These wonders were not just physical works, they were emotional headlights, reminders that humans could overcome any obstacle. However, these constructions were not intended only in the eye. Each wonder carried a story, a purpose. Some were born from the desire to honor the gods, others from an eternal love, and others from the simple pride of demonstrating the power of a civilization. Those who built them knew they were creating something bigger than they themselves. They knew it as they placed every stone, while carving every detail, while sacrificing years of their life in something that they might not live to see finished. But time, so cruel and implacable, was starting them from the physical world. Earthquakes, wars, looting, even carelessness, made many of these wonders fall apart. However, what time could not destroy was the idea. The idea that humans are able to touch eternity, to leave something so beautiful and monumental that not even oblivion can completely erase it. When thinking about these 7 wonders, it is inevitable to imagine the people who once walked under their shadow. What did they feel? Astonishment? Pride? Kai were little boy in such a great? Maybe all that, and more. Because those wonders were not only seen, they were experienced. They were something that changed those who watched them, as if every stone, every corner, had something to say, something to teach. And although most are no longer physically, they remain in us in ways that we may not understand completely. In each building that challenges the heavens, in each work that seems impossible, in every dream that refuses to die, they are present. Like a distant echo, like a whisper that reminds us that we are capable of extraordinary things. Just when the sun hid, that traveler turned around, but not before throwing a last look. The shadows of the structure seemed to lengthen towards the horizon, as if wanting to follow it. Something in him had changed. Maybe he couldn't explain it with words, but he felt it in his chest, in the accelerated rhythm of his heart. Because so are wonders, they touch you in forms that you cannot ignore. And if this is what remains just by imagining one, what else will they be behind the other 6? The murmur of the Euphrates River caressed the shores, while in its waters were reflected the lights of a city that seemed to breathe history. Mesopotamia, cradle of civilization, was proud, showing the world what humanity could achieve. It was a land where ziggurats challenged sky and clay boards told stories that still resonate today. But Mesopotamia was not alone. In the distance, the sands of Egypt stirred, hiding secrets and wonders, while in the Mediterranean the Greeks built temples for their immortal gods. Every corner of the ancient world was a vibrant mosaic, full of cultures that left an indelible mark. The ancient world was not homogeneous, but a complex tapestry of civilizations that were intertwined and sometimes collided with each other. Egypt, with its generous Nile, represented stability and permanence, while Mesopotamia, with its unpredictable Rios, was a reminder that life could be as fertile as dangerous. The Greeks, in their rocky peninsula, showed that greatness could arise even in difficult lands, while the Persians, with their vast empire, spoke of the unlimited ambition of the human being. Each civilization contributed something unique, something that we can still feel in the depths of our existence today. The Egyptians, for example, understood the relationship between the earthly and the divine in a way that few achieved. His pyramids, those silent giants who rise against the desert wind, were not just tombs, they were a cry for eternity. Each stone block seemed to say, "We were here, and we will not be forgotten." Meanwhile, the Greeks taught us to think, to question, to seek beauty in chaos. His Doric, Jonic and Corinthian columns were not only architectural structures, they were stone poems, a reminder that harmony could even be found in the smallest details. And in their theaters, under the open sky, tragedies and comedies gave life to human emotions, echoing in our hearts even centuries later. We cannot forget the Persians, whose empire was so vast that it seemed to cover the entire world. His road network, his hanging gardens, his tolerance towards conquered cultures, spoke of a vision that went beyond the borders. Persians not only wanted to conquer, they wanted to integrate, build something that would last beyond generations. And then there were the Romans, who not only admired the civilizations that preceded them, but also had them as even more monumental. Where the Greeks sought aesthetic perfection, the Romans sought usefulness and durability. His aqueducts and roads were not only functional, they were a testimony of their ambition and ingenuity. Each civilization had its own rhythm, its own melody. In China, the Great Wall serpent like a dragon, while in India, temples sprouted like sacred flowers. And although these cultures seemed so different, they all shared something essential, an insatiable desire to transcend, to leave a brand in the world. The ancient world was a place of wonders and contrasts. While some were dedicated to building monuments that challenged time, others looked at the sky, looking for answers in the stars. In Babylon, astronomers drawn maps of the universe, while in Egypt the priests accurately calculated the cycles of the Nile. Each civilization, in their own way, tried to understand the world that surrounded them, to look for meaning to life, and, in the process they created a legacy that still defines us. There was beauty even in chaos. Wars, invasions, and natural catastrophes failed to turn off the human spirit. If something defines the ancient world, it is its ability to rebuild after each fall. Babylon was destroyed and rebuilt, Rome burned and rose again, and Egypt, with all its dynasties and changes, always kept the heart of the Nile beating. The cultural legacy of these civilizations is not limited to their physical works. He is in his literature, his philosophy, his music. In each story of Gilgamesh, in each verse of Homer, in each hieroglyphic inscription, we can feel the voice of those who lived in such a distant world and, at the same time, so close to ours. As the ancient cultures interacted, they influenced each other, creating something bigger than they themselves. Trade, conquests, and trips caused ideas to mix, giving rise to unprecedented cultural wealth. The Phoenicians brought their alphabet through the Mediterranean, the Greeks adopted and adapted the writing of the Phoenicians, and the Romans took that writing to build their own system. Every corner of the ancient world has something to tell, something to teach. And although many of these cultures no longer exist in their original form, their echoes still resonate in our cities, in our ideas, in the way mere masters to the world. Because in the end, the ancient world is not just a collection of names and dates, it is a mirror in which we can see our own humanity. When the traveler stopped in front of the ruins of a lost city, he did not see only stones. He saw dreams, hopes and lives that, although fleeting, left a mark that time has not been able to erase. And so, with a heart full of amazement, he he understood that each civilization is a page in the great book of humanity, a chapter that tells us about who we were, and perhaps, of whom we can still be. The gloom of a small library in the Mediterranean was interrupted by the faint glow of an oil lamp. There, a poet contemplated the parchment in front of him, his pen suspended in the air as if the time he had stopped. He was an Antipatro of Sidon, a man of words, but also of an insatiable curiosity for the world. His thoughts sailed beyond the walls of the room, traveling distant lands, great landscapes and human works that challenged the imagination. At a time where civilizations rose and fell, Antipatro understood something essential: the wonders of the world were not only monuments, but symbols of human ingenuity, of their desire to transcend. It was not a simple exercise of admiration that guided his pen, but an act of preservation, a way to immortalize what time could try to erase. How to decide what was worthy of being a wonder? The question seemed as heavy as the stones of the pyramids of Giza. But Antipatro, with his sharp perception, knew that he did not simply seek the great or the colossal. I was looking for the sublime, what left anyone who contemplated it. Thus, he began to draw the list that, without knowing it, would forever mark the way the world would remember its own history. The ancient world was full of wonders, but not everyone could enter the list. There was something almost melancholic in that selection process, as if choosing also meant leaving behind. However, Antipatro did not hesitate. The pyramids of Giza, with their majesty that seemed to challenge the time, were the first obvious choice. These gigantic tombs were not only a tribute to the pharaohs, but a testimony of what a civilization could achieve when it intended to build something eternal. In the warm sands of Babylon, the Hanging Gardens emerged as an oasis of life and color. Although the accuracy of its existence remains a mystery, its inclusion was not accidental. They were a metaphor for human capacity to transform even the most inhospitable environments into places of indescribable beauty. The Artemis Temple in Ephesus, with its columns that seemed to touch the sky, was not just a place of worship. It was a sanctuary that reflected the deep respect of the ancient Greeks towards their gods and aesthetics. His magnificence was not only visual, he resonated in the spirit of those who visited him. Rhodes' Colossus, on the other hand, represented the triumph over adversity. This imposing statue of god Helios was erected as a symbol of resistance, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, humanity could rise with dignity and strength. Morsolo's tomb, Halicarnasso's mausoleum, was a song to love and duel. Built by Artemisia II in honor of her husband, her architectural beauty reflected the depth of human feelings. Each stone seemed to whisper a story of loss and memory. The Alexandria lighthouse illuminated more than the treacherous waters of the Mediterranean. It was a lighthouse of knowledge, a reminder of the importance of exploration and trade in the connection of cultures. Its light was a guide not only for navigators, but for humanity itself. Finally, the Olympia Stadium, with its monumental statue of Zeus, was the culminating point of devotion and human effort. Not only did a god be celebrated here, but also the human capacity for competition and excellence. Each of these wonders was chosen by Antipatro not only for their splendor, but for what they represented. They were a reflection of the human spirit, a manifestation of their dreams, fears, and aspirations. But there was a paradox in all this: while these works were immortalized in their list, the world around him continued to change, and many of them would disappear over time. Despite this, the list survived. It went from generation to generation, adapting, rewriting, but always maintaining its essence. Antipatro, in his modesty, perhaps did not fully understand the magnitude of what he had created. His list was not just a catalogue, it was a bridge between the past and the future, a reminder that, although time can destroy the stones, you can never erase your memory. The poet's words were still alive, echoing in every corner where someone mentioned the 7 seer villas, and although the world had changed, the emotion when thinking about these works remained the same, a mixture of astonishment, respect, and a hint of nostalgia. Because in those parchment lines, Antipatro had achieved something extraordinary: encapsulate the essence of what it means to be human. The antique keeps secrets that, even today, make us question the scope of human ingenuity. In an era where modern machines or high-tech materials did not exist, ancient civilizations managed to erect so majestic structures that they seemed to challenge the laws of physics. How did the Egyptians raise their immense pyramids? What knowledge allowed the Babylonians to create gardens that seemed to float in the air? The answer is in its architecture and in the evolution of their tools and methods, which combined skill, innovation, and a deep connection with nature. In the heart of the Nile Valley, the Egyptians perfected stone construction as if each block were an extension of its history. Their tools were simple: copper chisels, wooden hammers, and plumb levels. But behind that simplicity there was an impressive sophistication. They used sand and wood ramps to move blocks that weighed tons, joining each piece with a millimeter precision. Mathematics were their greatest ally. They dominated the use of triangle 3 for 5 to guarantee exact angles, creating structures that still resist the test of time. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, the Babylonians showed another face of engineering: adaptability. They lacked stone in abundance, but that was not an obstacle. They invented the adobe brick, molded with mud and dried to the sun. This material was not only economical and practical, but also versatile. With him they raised ziggurats that touched the sky, staggered structures that seemed to connect the earth with the gods. But its most intriguing innovation was the irrigation system that fed the hanging gardens. Although the details have been lost in history, it is believed that they used norias or water screws to raise the liquid from the Euphrates River to the upper terraces. This engineering feat not only challenged gravity, but also imagination. In the Greek peninsula, marble became the canvas of a new architectural revolution. The Greeks not only built buildings, they created poetry in stone. The part, for example, was erected with such an exquisite precision that each column was slightly inclined inward to counteract the optical illusion of curvature. Tools such as compass and strings with measured knots allowed architects to design perfect proportions, based on golden number, a mathematical formula that reflected the harmony of nature. The Romans, heirs of many ancient traditions, took engineering to another level. His most revolutionary invention was concrete, a mixture of lime, water, and volcanic ashes that could be shaped in any form and harden underwater. This material allowed the construction of aqueducts that brought water to entire cities, bridges that challenged the flows of the rivers, and amphitheaters such as the Colosseum, which could house thousands of spectators. In addition, its use of the arc and the vault allowed to create broad and resistant spaces, a technique that would be imitated for centuries. However, not everything was technical and mathematics. The ancient civilizations also understood the importance of symbolism. Each building, each monument, had a purpose that went beyond its practical function. The pyramids were not just tombs, they were stairs to the sky. The Greek temples not only housed the gods, they were an expression of divine perfection. And the Babylonian gardens not only embellished the landscape, they were a statement of power and love from a king towards his wife. The tools of antiquity were rudimentary compared to the current ones, but were backed by bright minds that understood how to work with nature instead of it. They knew the resistance of the wind, the flow of water, and the weight of the stones. But, above all, they knew the human soul, that unwavering desire to leave a mark, to build something that transcended generations. In each stone placed, in each raised arch, there was a message that spoke of effort, community, and purpose. Because, although the monuments were conceived by architects and built by artisans, their true greatness resides in the anonymous hands of the workers who sweated and bled to make them come true. Common people who, with simple tools and immense dreams, built the wonders that fill us today with amazement. But this astonishment is not only for what they achieved, but for what they remind us, that the true power of architecture and engineering does not lie in the hair amounts, but in the vision and determination of those who hold them. Thus, each monument becomes not only a testimony of the past, but a promise for the future, a promise that connects the story with what is yet to come. The echoes of mythology and religion throb in the great wonders of the ancient world, as if each stone and every design were a whisper of the gods towards humanity. These works were not only conceived as architectural manifestations, but also as offerings to the divine, temples erected in an effort to connect the earthly with the celestial. In their designs they beat stories of heroes, deities, and myths that gave meaning to the existence of the ancients, instilling purpose and hope. In the pyramids of Egypt, the link with mythology is undeniable. The ancient Egyptians did not see the pyramids only as tombs, they were portals towards the hereafter. For them, life did not end death, but continued in an eternal kingdom where Pharaoh, considered a living god, would govern with the gods. The pyramidal form, which seemed to touch the sky, symbolized the sun's rays descending from Ra, the solar god. Each stone block was placed with almost supernatural precision, as if the builders were fulfilling a divine mandate. On the other hand, Babylon's hanging gardens were a celebration of the union between nature and divinity. It is said that Nebuchadnezzar too built them for his wife, Amytes, who missed the green mountains of his homeland. However, beyond this love story, the gardens reflected a spiritual connection. In Mesopotamian culture, gardens represented paradise, a place where gods and humans could coexist. The presence of water flowing through the garden symbolized the primordial river Tiamat, a mythical figure that gave rise to the world. The Artemis temple in Ephesus, dedicated to the goddess of hunting and fertility, was impregnated with Greek mythology. Its monumental design was not only a space for worship, but also a reminder of Artemis' power. The columns, high and robust, symbolized strength and divine protection. Every detail, from the engravings on their walls to the offerings deposited inside, spoke of the intimate relationship between humans and their celestial patron. This temple was not just an architectural wonder, it was a declaration of faith and devotion. In Greece, Rhodes' Colossus stood like a bronze giant who watched the entrance to the port. This statue, dedicated to the god Helios, was not only a technical feat, but also a manifestation of pride and resistance. According to the myth, Rhodes' inhabitants erected the Colossus in thanks to Helios for his victory over an invading enemy. Its colossal size was no accident, it reflected the greatness of the gods and the smallness of mortals under their shadow. The Pharaoh de Alexandria, built on the island of Lighthouse, also had a deep mythological meaning. Although their practical function was to guide navigators, their design evoked the protection of the gods on those who ventured into the sea. The Greeks believed that Poseidon, the god of the sea, protected the sailors, and the lighthouse, with their eternal light, was an extension of that divine protection. The tower itself seemed a finger raised to the sky, pointing the road not only to the ships, but also in the favor of the gods. Even in the statue of Zeus in Olympia, mythology and architecture are intertwined in an act of supreme veneration. The image of Zeus sitting, majestic and serene, transmitted the power and benevolence of the king of the gods. Cover of gold and ivory, the statue shone as if it were touched by the divine essence itself. In the eyes of those who contemplated it, they not only saw a sculpture, they saw Zeus himself, omnipresent and omnipotent. These monuments were not created solely to admire their beauty or to fulfill an earthly function. They were the materialization of the deepest beliefs and values of the civilizations that built them. Each stone placed, every sculpted detail, contained a story that connected man with his gods. It was a constant reminder that humans were not alone, that there was a greater order, a purpose beyond the visible. The influence of mythology in these wonders not only defined their designs, but also its essence. They spoke a universal language of faith, fear, love, and transcendence. Because, deep down, they were not just monuments, they were bridges between the human and the divine, silent witnesses of an era in which the myths made sense of the world and the stones narrated eternal stories. The scorching sun of the Egyptian desert seemed to melt with the horizon, while a man contemplated the vast land extension that extended in front of his eyes. Alexander the Great, a young conqueror with dreams larger than any known empire, pointed out a point close to the Nile Delta and declared in a firm voice, "Here we will raise a city that will challenge time." Thus Alexandria was born, not only as a settlement, but as a vision, an immortal dream that would become the jewel of the ancient world. The Alexandria Foundation in 331 BC. It was not a fortuitous act, but a calculated decision full of ambition and symbolism. Alejandro, influenced by the mixture of cultures and the richness of the lands he had conquered, sought to create a bridge between the East and West, a place where Greek traditions could fuse with the wonders of the pharaonic Egypt. In that corner of the world, the Nile River was with the Mediterranean, a strategic place that promised trade, culture, and power. With the help of visionary architects such as Dinocrates de Rhodos, Alejandro designed a city that would be a reflection of its greatness. The streets of Alexandria traced in a grid pattern, an innovation for their time, which symbolized order and progress. In the heart of the city, palaces, temples, and theaters, places where public and private life were intertwined. But what really distinguished Alexandria was his port, one of the greatest and most sophisticated in the ancient world. From their docks, boats from all corners of the Mediterranean arrived loaded with goods, ideas, and dreams. The spirit of the city was not only reflected in its architecture, but also in its diversity. Alexandria was a melting pot of cultures where Greeks, Egyptians, Jews, and other communities lived in a vibrant exchange of ideas. The temples dedicated to the Greek gods rose next to the Egyptian sanctuaries, while the streets resonated with languages and dialects of distant places. The city was a microcosm of the world, a place where differences did not divide, but enriched. However, Alexandria was not only an impressive city of commerce and architecture, it was also a lighthouse of human knowledge. Although Alejandro did not live to see her flourish, her successor, Ptolemy I Soter, the city turned the intellectual epicenter of the ancient world. Under his reign and that of his descendants, the famous Library of Alexandria was built, a place that sought to gather all the knowledge of humanity. There, scholars of different disciplines worked tirelessly, translating texts and developing ideas that would mold the future of civilization. The museum, a research institute that was part of the library complex, housed some of the greatest thinkers in history, such as Euclid and Eratosthenes. In his corridors, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy flourished, while the city was erected as a lighthouse of wisdom in a world that still sought answers to the mysteries of the universe. But Alexandria was not without challenges. Throughout the centuries, its history was marked by conflicts and rivalries. From the power struggles among Alejandro's descendants to Roman invasions, the city was involved in political and military storms. Despite this, his spirit lasts, adapting and evolving with each new challenge. Alexandria's relationship with Egypt was complex from the beginning. Although it was located in Egyptian territory, the city always had a cosmopolitan and Hellenistic character that separated it from the rest of the country. The Ptolemaic pharaohs, who ruled from Alexandria, adopted the Egyptian traditions, but also reinterpreted them through a Greek lens. In this sense, Alexandria became a synthesis of two worlds, a place where ancient Egyptian beliefs intertwined with Greek philosophy. As the sun descended on the Mediterranean, its rays bathed the city in a golden glow, illuminating its white walls and its crystalline waters. Alexandria, with his incessant bustle and unstoppable energy, seemed to breathe his own life. Each corner, each market, each temple narrated stories of greatness, sacrifice, and human aspirations. It was a city that lived between the past and the future, a place that belonged to everyone and no one, a jewel that challenged time. At present, Alexandria remains a testimony of the ingenuity and the vision of its founders. Although much of its ancient glory has been lost in time, its legacy remains. The city not only represents the splendor of the ancient world, but also the eternal desire of humanity to build something that transcends mortality. And in the heart of that desire, it beats the very essence of Alexandria, a place where dreams became stone and where history found an eternal home. The sunlight fell strongly on the island of Pharaoh, a small extension of land in front to the coast of Alexandria. In the air a mixture of enthusiasm and challenge floated, while hundreds of workers, artisans, and architects gathered to undertake one of the most ambitious works of antiquity. The Mediterranean Sea roared in the distance, as if challenging men who were about to raise a structure that would dominate their waters for centuries, the majestic lighthouse of Alexandria. The project was born under the government of Ptolemy II Philadelphus, who, like his father, dreamed of becoming Alexandria in the center of the known world. The city needed a symbol of its greatness, something that could guide navigators through the treacherous waters and at the same time impressed visitors who arrived from distant lands. Thus, the lighthouse was conceived not only as a practical tool, but as a declaration of power, knowledge, and innovation. Cnido, the brilliant Greek architect, was in charge of designing this wonder. His vision was clear: to build a tower that resisted the elements and, at the same time, dazzled by its magnificence. But the task was not simple. The island of Pharaoh, although strategically located, presented significant challenges. The waves of the Mediterranean hit strongly, and the winds could be ruthless. Despite this, Sostrato, together with an army of workers, began to transform this small island into the home of one of the most iconic wonders in the ancient world. The lighthouse was built on 3 levels, each carefully designed to fulfill a specific function and provide stability to the structure. The base was square, robust and solid, made of large limestone blocks carefully cut and assembled. This lower level not only provided a firm base, but also housed stores and rooms for workers in charge of keeping the lighthouse in operation. The materials, extracted from the nearby quarries, were transported to the island with almost military precision, using wooden rafts and cranes specially designed for the work. The second level was octagonal, an ingenious transition between the square base and the circular top. This design not only added an aesthetic element, but also helped reduce wind resistance, a crucial detail for a structure of that height. Here, the marble began to replace the limestone, contributing a brightness that reflected the sunlight and made the lighthouse shine even during the day. The third and final level was a cylindrical tower that culminated in a platform where the fire that illuminated the Mediterranean nights. In this top, huge polished bronze mirrors were placed, a technological innovation of the time, which reflected the light of the fire and projected at surprising distances. According to the stories, the slice of the lighthouse could be seen more than 50 kilometers away, guiding the sailors with a precision that seemed almost magical. The work was hard and dangerous. The workers, mostly slaves and peasants, faced strenuous days under the scorching sun, raising stone blocks that weighed tons and facing the constant danger of accidents. Wooden cranes and pulley systems squeaked under the weight of loads, and every day of construction was a resistance and determination test. However, the vision of support and the promise of something eternal motivated everyone. The fire that burned at the top of the lighthouse required a constant supply of wood and fuel, which implied a huge logistics effort. The roads that connected the port of Alexandria with the island were filled with carts loaded with logs and oil, while those in charge of feeding the fire worked tirelessly to keep the flame alive. At night, the slice of the lighthouse was a show in itself, a literal and figurative lighthouse of hope and progress. But beyond its practical function, the lighthouse had a deep symbolic meaning. It represented the union between nature and human engineering, a reminder that, with ingenuity and effort, men could even tame the most indomitable elements. Its design also reflected the influence of the mythological beliefs of the time. At the top of the tower, a statue of the god Helios, the god of the sun, was erected as a tribute to the connection between the light, the sea, and humanity. As the construction advanced, the lighthouse began to take shape, and the city of Alexandria was filled with pride. The merchants and navigators arriving at the port talked about the structure with amazement, comparing it with the great works of the gods. It was a tangible testimony of what a civilization could achieve when it combined knowledge, resources, and a shared vision. Finally, when the last stone block was placed and the fire turned on for the first time, the pharaoh rose like a vigilant giant on the Mediterranean. His flames danced at night, while the waters reflected their light, creating a show that left everyone out of breath. It was more than a lighthouse, it was a poem of stone and fire, a statement that humanity, although fragile, had the power to illuminate even the darkest nights. And so, under the starry mantle from the Egyptian sky, the Alexandria lighthouse became a promise of guidance, security, and greatness. But the story of the lighthouse was just beginning, and the generations that followed faced the challenge of preserving their light in a world that constantly changed, like the same waters that surrounded it. The Pharaoh of Alexandria, more than an architectural feat, rose as a symbol loaded with cultural and mythological meanings that deeply resonated the psyche of the ancient world. It was not simply a tower that guided navigators, it was a spiritual lighthouse, a bridge between the human and the divine, a tangible manifestation of the power and ambition of a civilization that dared to dream of the impossible. In the literature and mythology of the time, the lighthouse soon acquires an almost mystical aura. The poet spoke of him as if he were a vigilant giant, a being with his own life that extended his light as a protective hand on the unpredictable waters of the Mediterranean. His fire, fed with a constant effort, was perceived as an eternal flame that challenged darkness and chaos, with Prometheus delivering the divine gift of light to men. For some, the lighthouse was not just a construction, it was a divine work, a gift from the gods to humanity. The god Helios, to whom the representation is attributed to the top of the lighthouse, was an emblem of power and perseverance. The ancient Greeks associated him with the sun, a heavenly guardian who was traveling daily through the skies in his fire car. That his figure crowned the lighthouse reinforced the idea that this structure not only belonged to men, but was connected to the superior forces that governed the cosmos. For sailors, the lighthouse not only offered physical guidance, but also a sense of divine protection while navigating uncertain waters. In the stories of travelers and chroniclers, the lighthouse acquired a prominent place as a symbol of Alexandria, a city that was, in itself, a melting pot of cultures and knowledge. Its light was described as a guide for the body and soul, a promise of safe arrival and a metaphor for the search for knowledge and truth. The ancient texts mentioned how their glow seemed to challenge the laws of nature, reaching distances that could only be explained as a miracle or an act of magic. In the popular mythology of the time, stories began to arise that attributed supernatural properties to the lighthouse. Some said that their light could reveal not only the way to navigators, but also the secrets hidden in the depths of the sea. Others talked about how the mirrors of the lighthouse could direct rays of fire that away the enemies, protecting the city of invasions. These legends, although fantasy, reflect the deep admiration and respect that inspired this wonder. Even the philosophers of antiquity found in the lighthouse a symbol of intellectual and spiritual lighting. For them, the light that emanated from their top represented the triumph of knowledge over ignorance, a metaphor for the tireless search for truth. Alexandria, with his famous library and his scholars' community, thus became the lighthouse of civilization, a place where the lights of reason and understanding never went out. The lighthouse also found its place in the stories of love and tragedy that resonated in the hearts of common people. Tales of sailors who promised to return guided by their light were intertwined with legends of lost souls that followed the glow of the lighthouse, only to disappear in the depths of the sea. These stories, often counted in the taverns and in homes, endowed the lighthouse of a melancholic soul, a duality between hope and danger that captured collective imagination. In later writings, especially during the Roman era, the lighthouse began to symbolize not only the greatness of Alexandria, but also the fragility of human power. Although its light continued to shine, earthquakes and the passage of time remembered that even the greatest wonders were subject to the inevitable forces of nature. The Roman poets, with their inclination for melancholic reflection, described the lighthouse as a reminder of the transience of human glory, an echo of past greatness that still persisted in collective memory. Over time, the Alexandria lighthouse became a universal symbol of guide and hope, transcending its original function and acquiring a permanent place in the vital cultural odor of humanity. Its light, although extinguished centuries ago, continues to shine on the pages of history and in the stories we still tell. And perhaps, in the heart of each traveler who is looking for his way, the flame of the lighthouse still burns, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, there is always something that guides us towards the shore. The echoes of his glow still seem to resonate in the waters of the Mediterranean. The lighthouse of Alexandria, a symbol of greatness and knowledge, stood firmly, challenging the inclement weather. However, like all human wonders, their destiny was sealed by the forces that went far beyond the skill of men. The legacy of the lighthouse, that eternal glow that had guided countless navigators and had become an icon of humanity, suffered the relentless wear of nature. The first great threat to the structure was not a visible enemy or a conflict, but the earth itself, that force that sometimes seems asleep but can wake up with unstoppable fury. In 365 AD, a devastating earthquake hit the city of Alexandria and its surroundings. The island of Pharaoh, where the lighthouse was erected, was beaten with such violence that the structure began to wobble, its foundations were shaken, and the stones that had kept firm the tower began to crack. The waves of the Mediterranean Sea, as if they joined this attack on the earth, also contributed to the catastrophe, hitting the base of the tower furiously, further weakening the structure that had remained firm for centuries. It was not the first natural disaster that affected the lighthouse. Over the centuries, earthquakes and storms they had hit the Alexandria region, but this was the most devastating of all. Despite the efforts to restore it, the damage was irreversible. The structure began to collapse, and with it the glow vanished that for so many centuries the navigators had guided. The lighthouse, which was once a masterpiece of engineering, became a reminder of human fragility to the immensity of nature. What followed the 365th earthquake? It was a long process of decay. The lighthouse, already damaged, suffered more blows over time. Other additional earthquakes in the subsequent centuries just dismantled what remained of their glory. For the 7th century, the Alexandria lighthouse was only a shadow of what it was. It is said that the last part of the tower collapsed during an earthquake in 1303, and with it, the lighthouse disappeared completely, leaving only ruins scattered throughout the sea. The memory of the lighthouse, however, was not dissolved with its destruction. His legacy lasted in the collective memory, in the stories of the travelers, and in the writings of the historians. For centuries, there was talk of the majesty of the lighthouse and its function as a guide, not only of the ships, but also of the human spirit. Subsequent generations, both in the Arab and European world, continued to observe the ruins and leave testimony of what was once. But what really gave Alexandria's lighthouse an immortal place in history were not only the stories that survives, but the archaeological remains that still talk about its greatness. In the 19th and 20th centuries, archaeologists began investigating the seabed off the coast of Alexandria. There, in the waters that once witnessed their light, found fragments of columns, broken statues, and stone blocks that had belonged to the famous structure. Although the lighthouse was no longer, his legacy remained in the pieces scattered throughout the sea, as if the ocean himself had decided to keep his secrets. These marine excavations revealed the scope of the magnificence of the lighthouse. It was discovered that part of the original structure had been built with white marble and limestone, materials that reflected sunlight and made the lighthouse shine like a star in the dark. They also found sculptural elements that represented gods and heroes, elements that reinforced the connection of the lighthouse with the divine. Helios's sculptures, the god of the sun, and other mythological figures, were destined not only to decorate, but to declare the presence of something much bigger than a simple tower. The ruins of the Pharaoh de Alexandria are not only a testimony of human skill in engineering and design, but also of the relationship that the ancient civilizations had with the natural elements and the divine. Each stone that now lies submerged in the sea is a reminder of the great aspirations that fed the construction of this wonder, but also of the fragility of what men believe. Through the centuries, the lighthouse has transcended its material existence. It has been a symbol in literature, poetry, and philosophy. The imagon of his light, which guided navigators through the dark waters, has remained an emblem of hope and direction. In the heart of each story that is told about him, he still shines the flame that the horizon once illuminated, and although the physical lighthouse has disappeared, his light continues to guide those who seek meaning, knowledge, and destiny. Today, the ruins of the lighthouse continue to be one of the most significant archaeological wonders of antiquity. Although its light has extinguished, its legacy remains, embodied in the stone fragments and in the stories that, like an unwavering lighthouse, continue to illuminate the pages of the story. In the vast sand of the Egyptian desert, where the scorching sun mixes with the shadows of the ancient ruins, one of the most iconic structures of humanity is erected, the pyramid. But behind his gigantic silhouette, there is a historical context that was forged for centuries of power, faith, and ambition. The construction of the pyramids of Egypt was not only an architectural achievement, but also the result of an era marked by the consolidation of a kingdom that wanted to transcend time and death. During the Third Dynasty, around 2700 BC, Egypt began to bloom under the leadership of the pharaohs, divine beings who ruled as representatives of the gods on earth. It was a time of great political stability and economic prosperity. The pharaohs, aware of their legacy, began planning monuments that not only celebrated their power, but ensured their immortality. At that time, the pyramids were not simply tombs, but represented the connection between the pharaoh and the gods, their ascent to the beyond, and their continuation in eternal life. The pharaohs of the time not only ruled with a scepter, but also with a deep understanding of their relationship with the gods and the cosmos. The god Ra, the god of the sun, was central in the Egyptian cosmology, and the pyramid, with its triangular form that pointed to heaven, it was thought that it represented the rise of the pharaoh towards this supreme god. The pyramid was seen as a means for Pharaoh to join Ra on his eternal journey, ensuring that his soul lived forever, even when his body disintegrated. The historical context of the construction of the pyramids is also intrinsically linked to the rise of the Egyptian bureaucracy. Throughout the dynasties, the country consolidated a centralized administration system that allowed to mobilize large resources and workers. The pyramids were not built in one day. Behind them there was a sophisticated administrative machinery, capable of organizing thousands of workers, artisans, and architects, who worked for years to create these great tombs. The pharaoh on duty, considered a living god, needed to ensure a prosperous future for his soul and that of his people. To do this, the pyramids not only represented an act of personal devotion, but also a sample of the power of Egypt against the known world. The construction of the pyramids, especially that of Cheops, the largest and most famous of all, was a titanic task that involved the mobilization of a vast workforce. Although many still discuss the exact techniques used, it is clear that construction was the result of centuries of engineering improvement and mathematics. The Egypt of the pharaohs was not only focused on the construction of monuments, it was a deeply religious civilization, with rituals and beliefs that permeated every aspect of everyday life. The pharaohs were seen as mediators between the gods and humans, and their life and death were not only personal events, but also had a direct impact on the cosmic order and the stability of the country. The construction of the pyramids represented a way to ensure that this divine order was not interrupted, that life continued without interruptions, and that the pharaoh had a place in eternity. The context of the construction of the pyramid is also a history of tradition. The Egyptians did not begin to build pyramids immediately. Before, the tombs were simple structures, as mastabas. But it was under the dynasty of the most powerful pharaohs, such as Dosa and Snefru, that the idea of the pyramid began to take shape. It was the pharaoh Dosa, in 2630 BC, who, under the direction of its architect Imhotep, ordered the construction of the famous staggered pyramid in Saqqara. This was the first step towards greatness, an experiment that became the basis of what would be known as the classical pyramid. At the time of the ancient kingdom, Egypt was in its maximum splendor, both in terms of military power and wealth. The borders of the kingdom expanded and established an intensive work economy that allowed the construction of these monuments. The labor that built the pyramids was composed of workers, peasants and artisans who, although they were not mostly slaves, worked as part of a tax system. During times of flooding of the Nile, when the fields were covered by the waters, these people were recruited to work on pharaonic projects. During the construction of pyramids, logistics and organization were fundamental. Not only materials such as limestone, granite and basalt were required, but the transport of these stones from the quarries to the construction site was an impressive feat. The Egyptians built ramps, used rafts to transport blocks through the Nile, and used lever and roller techniques to move the stones efficiently. All this in an environment where extreme heat and difficult conditions test human resistance. Every aspect of the construction of the pyramids, from the foundations to the cusp, was impregnated with a deep symbolism. Pyramids represented not only death, but also resurrection. The pharaoh, buried inside the pyramid, was seen as a god on his journey to eternal life. His grave was not only a shelter for his body, but also a place of rebirth, a space where life would continue through his soul, which ascended towards the sun. The pyramids, as great guardians of the legacy of Egypt, are not only tombs, they are witnesses of a golden age, where engineering, spirituality and power converged in an immortal structure. As the sun rises on the horizon of the Egyptian desert, the shadow of the Great Pyramid lengthens and imposes itself, as a giant that challenges the passage of time. This monumental structure is not only a testament of the greatness of Egypt, but also an enigma that has baffled generations of historians, architects and engineers. The construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza, in charge of the pharaoh Cheops during the 4th dynasty, was not simply an engineering challenge, but a proof of the human will against almost unsurpassed obstacles. Pharaoh Cheops, whose ambition did not know limits, ordered the construction of this pyramid as its monumental tomb, aimed at guaranteeing its immortality. His vision was clear, erecting a structure that not only reflected his power, but also challenged the concept of death at the same time. The Great Pyramid had to be eternal, a symbol of its ascent to the kingdom of the gods. But to achieve this, thousands of workers, years of tireless work, and a series of methods that are still debated were needed. The first challenge was the magnitude of the work. With an original 146-meter height and an estimated weight of 6 million tons, the Cheops Pyramid was the highest structure in the world for almost 4,000 years. How could the Egyptians of more than 4,000 years move and stack such an amount of stone without the modern tools we have today? The answer seems to overflow any logic. Instead of advanced construction machines, the ancient Egyptians trusted the force of human labor, the cunning of architects and a series of innovations that made this construction a miracle of engineering. The stone blocks, which mostly came from the nearby quarries of Tura and Assuan, were transported through the Nile in rafts and then dragged or raised with a system of ramps. However, the mystery lies in how the Egyptians raised the huge stone blocks, which could weigh up to 2.5 tons. Theories about how the blocks vary, but the most accepted suggests that ramps of various forms were used, whether straight, spiral or zigzaggant, which allowed to raise the blocks to the highest parts of the pyramid. The workers, organized in teams, dragged the blocks along these ramps with simple, but effective ropes and tools. The logistics challenges were equally huge. The construction of the Great Pyramid extended over 2 decades, and during that time, thousands of workers had to be fed, hosted, and equipped. It wasn't just a matter of moving stones, it was a collective effort of an unprecedented scale. The workers were not only responsible for transporting and placing the blocks, but also for the construction of the ramps, the organization of the supply of materials, and the management of the necessary resources to maintain the project underway. Despite the harsh conditions, the labor was mainly provided by peasants who worked during the flood months of the Nile, when their lands were underwater and could not cultivate. This work was not considered a punishment, but a way to serve the pharaoh, who was seen as a living god. As the pyramid began to take shape, the challenge became even greater. The design of the Cheops pyramid was so ambitious that each error in the placement of the blocks could compromise the entire structure. The architects and artisans had to calculate and thoroughly adjust each level of the pyramid to ensure that the stones were perfectly aligned, thus preventing the pyramid from falling apart. The Egyptians, knowledgeable about the importance of precision, developed an extremely advanced measurement and tools for the time, such as plumbs, strings and leveling. The use of these instruments allowed the pyramid to be built with such accuracy that still today remains a reference in the world of architecture. Despite the advances in engineering, challenges were not limited to physical work. The construction of the Great Pyramid was also an act of faith, since the Egyptians firmly believed that their pharaoh should be buried in the greatest possible way to ensure its ascent to the beyond. Each stone block that was placed represented one more step towards immortality, not only for Cheops, but also for architects, workers, and artisans who worked in the pyramid. In fact, many of the workers left inscriptions and graphs on the walls of the pyramid cameras, revealing details about their lives and the meaning of the project. The legacy of the construction of the Great Pyramid is not only technical, but also cultural. Pharaoh Cheops knew that, by building a monument of such magnitude, he was ensuring that his name lasts forever. For centuries, the pyramid was a lighthouse of admiration, not only for the Egyptians, but also for travelers and explorers around the ancient world. The Greeks and Romans were so fascinated by the pyramid that included it in their stories as one of the wonders of the ancient world, a symbol of the greatness and power of Egypt. However, the construction process was also marked by the constant fight against the elements. The abrasing heat of the desert, the sandstorms, and the occasional floods of the Nile tested both the human resistance and the structure of the pyramid. In addition, the fact that the pyramid was built without modern machinery raises questions about the amazing capacity of Egyptian civilization to overcome obstacles and create a work of such magnificence. Today, more than 4,000 years after its construction, the Great Pyramid is still standing, challenging the limits of time and space. Although many theories and methods continue to debate, one thing is true: the construction of the pyramid was not only an achievement of engineering, but also an act of dedication and faith that has left an indelible mark on the history of mankind. In the silence of the vast plains of Giza, where the pyramid still rises majestically, the echo of those who built this wonder continues to resonate throughout the centuries. Giza's Great Pyramid is not only a stone monument, but a door towards a world of myths, legends, and mysteries that have fed human imagination for millennia. Its form, its perfection, and age have generated endless esoteric theories and superstitions that transcend the limits of reason, immersing those who approach it in an enigmatic universe where science and the supernatural are intertwined. Since the first travelers arrived in Egypt and looked in amazement at the majestic pyramid, stories that attributed to construction a power beyond human understanding began to be born. For the ancient Egyptians, the pyramid was not only a tomb, but a sacred place that connected the living with the world of the dead, and many believed that when they entered their cameras, one could access divine secrets, almost prohibited. One of the most popular superstitions associated with the pyramid is what maintains that people who get too close to it can experience a kind of curse. It is said that those who transfer the borders of what is sacred can suffer a strange series of misfortunes. This belief began to take strength from the famous history of the Curse of the Pyramid, which supposedly gained strength when several members of the Howard Carter's expedition, the archaeologist who discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun, died in mysterious circumstances shortly after to open the grave. Although experts have explained deaths due to natural causes, rumors about the pyramid and their possible curses are still alive, feeding the idea that the place keeps more than ancient stones. In addition to these superstitions, there are those who believe that the pyramid was built by beings from another world. Some claim that impressive dimensions and PR alignment of the pyramid with the stars could only be the result of an advanced technology, perhaps of extraterrestrial civilizations. The defenders of this theory indicate that the perfect geometric form of the pyramid and its ability to be aligned with the cardinal points and certain constellations could not have been the work of simple mortals of antiquity. These ideas have been driven by the frequent representations of beings with unusual characteristics in the Egyptian ancient art and the mysterious connection that some believe that exists between the pyramid and the stars. Symbolism is another fascinating aspect of the pyramid that has fed many legends and theories. The triangular form of the pyramid has been associated for centuries with the concept of ascension and the idea that Pharaoh, being buried inside, would rise to heaven, together with the gods. However, some people believe that the pyramid has a special energy power, as if it were a gigantic energy point that connects the Earth with the cosmos. In the 19th century, a writer named Charles Piazzi Smith popularized the idea that the pyramid had a cosmic function, a kind of antenna that channeled unknown forces from the outer space. It was said that people who stopped over certain areas of the pyramid could experience a strange sensation of spiritual elevation, a kind of connection with the divine. Some legends go beyond cosmic energy and immerse themselves in the supernatural, speaking of spirits and ghosts that are around the pyramid. It is said that, on the moonless nights, the echoes of ancient voices can be heard near the pyramid, as if the pharaohs and their courtiers had never left. There are those who claim to have seen mysterious figures, shadows that fade quickly, or strange lights around the pyramid. For the Egyptians, the pyramid was not only a physical place, but also a portal to beyond, and for many, that door never closed completely. Among the most intriguing stories is the legend of the guardians of the pyramid. It is believed that a group of priests or guardians guarded the pyramid and its content, making sure that no intruder dared to desecrate the sacred rest of the pharaoh. These guardians, according to some stories, possess secret knowledge about fate and immortality, and it was said that they had magical powers capable of protecting the pyramid from any looting attempt. There are those who say that these guardians still monitor the place in a spiritual plane, willing to enforce the old laws. And then there are the esoteric theories that link the pyramid with the ancient occult traditions. The pyramid, with its perfect geometry and its deep symbolism, has become a symbol of initiation in several secret societies, such as Masons. The pyramid is often seen as an emblem of spiritual lighting, a symbol of ascension and hidden knowledge. It is believed that the ancient Egyptians, with their mastery of symbolism and architecture, hid in the pyramid secrets that only those who passed through initiatory tests could reveal. Some claim that the pyramid is a stone book, full of symbols and encrypted messages that only initiates can understand. The mystery of the Great Pyramid intensifies even more by the many unknowns that surround its construction. Despite centuries of study, the question about how it was possible to erect a structure of such magnitude with the resources available in ancient times still definitively. Some theories suggest that pyramid is a manifestation of arcana knowledge, transmitted through generations of wise and priests, while others insist that its construction is the result of an advanced understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and physics. Throughout history, the Great Pyramid has been a place where the borders between history, science, and superstition blur. The esoteric theories and the legends that surround it continue to capture the imagination of people around the world. While the wind blows through the desert and the stars shine on the pyramid, it is clear that this old monument will continue to be a source of mystery, admiration, and fascination for all those who dare to look beyond their stone walls. Today, Giza's Great Pyramid remains one of the most impressive and recognizable wonders in the world. Despite the centuries that have passed since its construction, its presence survives with an unwavering force. Not only is it a testimony of the architectural genius of the ancient Egyptians, but also an enduring symbol of mystery and fascination that attracts millions of people from all corners of the planet. The impact of the pyramid on world tourism is measurable. Year after year, thousands of tourists approach Giza's desert in the hope of seeing with their own eyes what they only knew through books, photos, or documentaries. When they finally step on the golden sand and look at the majestic structure, many feel overwhelmed. It is not only a matter of size, but of the feeling of being in front of a vestige of a remote past, which has resisted the passage of time and the inclement nature. For some, experience is almost mystical. The simple fact of being close to one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world fills the air of a palpable energy. There is talk of the feeling of transcendence, as if a link with history itself was activated when there is there, at that precise moment. Tourism has not only allowed the pyramid to be admired for modern generations, but has also given way to a cultural and spiritual phenomenon that has touched those who visit it deeply. Guided visits by experts who accompany tourists not only explain the history and architectural details of the pyramid, but also touch the legends and myths that still revolve around it. Every corner of the pyramid is impregnated with stories. Tourists walk around their huge stone blocks, feel the sand under their feet, and are often told how, thousands of years ago, the pharaoh rested there, being protected by a series of secrets and rituals that today seem so far away and disconcerting. It is not only the number of visitors that makes the pyramid have such a great impact, but its influence on the development of modern archaeology. Studies and excavations in Giza remain one of the main sources of knowledge about Egyptian civilization. With each excavation season, new artifacts, inscriptions, and discoveries add to the vast legacy of this old civilization, revealing details that until recently were completely unknown. Archaeologists continue to explore the interior of the pyramid, looking for answers to the questions that remain unanswered. How was it really built? What secrets hide inside their cameras? Technological advances, such as the use of scanners and sensors, have allowed researchers to obtain information without the need for invasive excavations, revealing hidden cameras and secret passages that perhaps have never been noticed. In this way, the pyramid is not only a physical monument, but also an archaeological puzzle that never ceases to surprise. If a ship entered into forbidden waters, nymphs were responsible for diverting their course, protecting marine life and, in some cases, even punishing humans for daring to challenge the laws of nature. This link with nature also connected them deeply with the stations. The nymphs were the ones that announced the arrival of spring, the flowering of flowers, and the abundance of the harvest. When winter was installed and the earth covered with ice, the nymphs retired, but never disappeared completely. They knew that every cycle should be fulfilled and that, in the end, spring would come. This, without a doubt, reinforces the popular and scientific fascination by the monument. On the other hand, the pyramid remains a reflection of the struggle between the past and the present. While the Egyptian authorities face challenges to conserve the monument and manage the flow of tourists, the pressure of modernity also raises issues about longer-term preservation. Mass tourism has begun to show its effects, the sand has eroded, the stone blocks have suffered the wear and tear of the visitors. However, the pyramid remains firm, resisting as it has done for millennia, facing both humanity and nature in an act of constant resilience. It is almost as if the pyramid, with its solid structure, keeps secrets that only she knows and will not be easy to reveal. Each stone in its construction tells a story, each crack speaks of a distant time, and each visitor that is approaching has a unique experience that somehow connects the past with the present. Its impact is not limited to tourist or archaeological, their presence also inspires those who seek answers, to those who feel called by mystery, and who believe that something beyond the physical is hidden inside those colossal walls. Over the years, the pyramid continues to evolve in its meaning. If it is a real grave and a religious center, it has become a cultural symbol and a world heritage. Its influence on the coming generations has no paragon. Each discovery inside resurrects old theories and tests new hypotheses. Archaeologists, historians, and elder tourists are still witnessing a living legacy, while the pyramid remains, in its eternal stillness, waiting for the next chapter of its history. Rhodes, a radiant sun island and crystalline waters, was much more than a simple piece of land in the Aegean Sea. In the heart of ancient Greece, this island represented a strategic power whose influence extended far beyond its coasts. For centuries, Rhodes' inhabitants knew how to take advantage of the sea currents, commercial connections and, above all, their privileged location, to become one of the most formidable forces of antiquity. Rhodes' history is marked by its constant struggle for power and independence, but also for its ability to adapt, grow, and prosper in a world where the control of maritime routes meant wealth and power. Located at a crossroads between Asia Minor, Africa, and Europe, the island served as a bridge between cultures, a vital point in the trade and navigation network of the ancient world. Any empire who would like to have a voice in the Mediterranean needed to make sure that Rhodos was on his side or, at least, under his influence. Rhodes reached its peak when, around the 4th century BC, it became a key economic and cultural center. Its port, known as El Puerto de Mandrake, was one of the most important in the ancient world, a bustling trade center where products of the entire Greek Empire were exchanged, from metals to spices, and everything that could be transported by sea. The island was also famous for its skill in naval construction. The Rhodes stood out as excellent sailors and artisans, building ships and warships that dominated nearby waters. However, it was not only maritime skill that made Rhodes famous, but its immense military power. For centuries, the Rhodes knew how to use strength to protect their island and maintain its independence. The famous surrounding fleet, composed of well-trained and equipped ships, was one of the most feared in the Mediterranean. This fleet not only protected the waters of the island, but also played a crucial role in the defense of Greek interests against the ambitions of the great empires of the time, such as the Persians and later the Romans. However, the glory of Rhodes reached its greatest expression with the construction of the Colossus of Rhodes, a gigantic statue that erected in honor of the god Helios, protector of the island. The Colossus was not only an architectural wonder, but also a symbol of prosperity and power of the island. With a height of more than 30 meters, it rose above the entrance of the port, with its arms extended to the sea, as if hugging the city itself. It was a symbol of the maritime force of Rhodes, and its destruction by an earthquake only added more mystery and legend to the history of the island. Rhodes also played a crucial role in the struggles between the great powers of the Mediterranean. During the Peloponnese Wars, the island aligned with Sparta, not for the love of this city-state, but by strategic pragmatism. They knew that the control of the waters would allow them to maintain their independence against the ambitions of Athens and other powers. Subsequently, the island was also an ally of the Romans, who, recognizing the importance of Rhodes, sought to ensure their loyalty in exchange for protection. The location of Rhodes, at the crossroads of so many commercial and military routes, made the island constantly subject to disputes and conquests. Despite the difficulties and external threats, the Rhodes knew how to resist. Each invasion, each attack, only strengthened its determination to maintain its independence. Through a series of alliances, military victories, and diplomatic skill, they managed to stay free for centuries. But the island was not only important for its military power and its dominance of trade. Rhodes was also a cultural center. His school of philosophy and the development of sculpture, architecture, and the arts were equally notable. The city of Rhodes housed a vibrant intellectual life, where philosophers, mathematicians, and artists shared their ideas and creations. It was a melting pot of thoughts and talents, where antiquity was reflected in its sculptures and monuments, many of which have reached us in fragments. Rhodes' impact on the history of the ancient world, however, was not only that of military power. It was also that of an island that knew how to handle its geographical position with cunning, which cultivated its culture without losing sight of the need to stay strong in the international arena. Their ability to adapt to changes and their constant struggle for independence made you around, for centuries, a symbol of resistance and power in an ancient world that was always at war. The importance of Rhodes, although it often eclipsed by other great powers of the time, remains indisputable. At its peak, the island was not only a lighthouse of wealth and power, but also a melting pot of ideas, art, and culture. The history of Rhodes is a will to the perseverance of a civilization that, although small in size, had a much greater influence than many could have imagined. Imagine a gigantic figure, so high that it seems to touch the sky, erected on the port of an island bathed by the sun. The winds of the Aegean Sea blow strong while the Colossus of Rhodes rises, with his arms extended to the horizon, joining the sky and the sea in a single gesture. This statue was not only an architectural wonder, but a symbol of the strength and divinity of Helios, the god of the sun, protector of the island. Rhodes' Colossus was not simply one more statue. It was the response of the Rhodes to the challenges they faced in their struggle for independence and their desire to demonstrate their power and devotion to their gods. The history of its construction is marked by the ambition and skill of a civilization that knew how to combine art, engineering, and symbolism in a unique way. The Colossus design was a masterpiece of ancient engineering. The statue was devised by the sculptor Caius de Cute, who was selected to carry out the monumental task after the victory of the Rhodians over the forces of the governor of Cyprus, Antigonos. This victory, obtained in 305 BC, left Rhodos in a position of great power, and the construction of the Colossus was an act of celebration, but also a statement to the world that Rhodes was an island capable of challenging difficulties and overcoming any adversity. With a height of approximately 33 meters, the Colossus of Rhodes was one of the largest statues in the ancient world. The figure of the god Helios, who stood on a stone base, was constructed mainly of bronze and iron. More than 12,000 bronze talents were needed, a colossal amount of metal, to give life to this figure. Each part of the Colossus was meticulously designed. His legs, which separated into a firm posture, held the structure solidly, while their extended arms seemed to embrace the island and its inhabitants. In his hands, Helios did not support any object, but the symbology was clear. His presence covered everything he could see and beyond. But the construction was not exempt from difficulties. The Rhodios, who were already experts in navigation and naval construction, had to overcome huge technical challenges. The sculpture was raised on a huge pedestal, and the workers had to design special techniques to maintain the stability of the statue, since the Colossus had to resist the strong winds and the inclement weather. The materials, although resistant, had to be combined in an innovative way to shape such a figure, and the use of an internal iron structure was used to ensure the stability of the statue. The Colossus was designed to be seen from all corners of the port of Rhodos. Its location was key to transmitting the message of power. It was a lighthouse for navigators, a symbol of hope and protection. In ancient times, statues not only had aesthetic value, but also had a functional purpose. The Colossus was, so to speak, the entrance door to the island, and its presence at the entrance of the port marked Rhodos as a place that could challenge the waves of the sea and the threats of the outside world. As for his symbolism, Rhodes's Colossus was much more than a bronze statue. Helios, the god of the sun, was revered by the Rhodes not only as the protector of the sea and vessels, but also as the god who illuminated daily life. The sunlight was associated with life, growth, and prosperity, and by erecting such a monumental figure in his honor, the Rhodes wanted to pay tribute to the divinity that gave them vital energy. The Colossus was a tribute to Helios, a tangible way of thanking him for his protection and for the blessings that the island received. In mythology, Helios was a god who was not only revered on Rhodes, but in all of Greece. However, Rhodos Island was especially favored by this god, and the Colossus was erected as a reminder of that special relationship. With the sun shining on his figure, the statue represented the eternal link between the god and his people. Each dawning, when the sun's rays illuminated the statue, seemed that Helios became life, watching the waters and protecting travelers. Rhodes' Colossus also had a deep political significance. It was a statement of the independence of the island in a world full of empires and ambitions. With the Colossus, the Rhodes were sending a clear message: Rhodos was not only a rich and powerful island, but also an island that did not be submitted to foreign forces. It was a symbol of resistance and freedom. The image of Helios, standing with pride on the port, became the face of the island, its registered trademark. However, the Colossus did not last forever. In 226 BC, a devastating earthquake hit the island, and the statue collapsed, falling towards the ground into pieces of bronze and iron. Despite its fall, the legend of the Colossus lasts. The Rhodios, instead of rebuilding it, decided to leave the remains of the statue as they were, making them a reminder of the past greatness of the island. The broken figure, but still majestic in its destruction, became a symbol of the fragility of life, but also of the endurability of memory and legacy. Today, Rhodes' Colossus is just a shadow of what it was. The statue no longer stands on the port, but its story is still alive in the stories of the ancients and in the collective memory. Although the Colossus is no longer, what it represents, devotion, power, and struggle for independence, continues to inspire those who listen to their history. Helios continues to illuminate Rhodes, not with its physical light, but with the light of a story that will never be forgotten. In the vast sea of stories and symbols of antiquity, the Colossus of Rhodes stands as a figure that not only challenged the waves of the Aegean Sea, but also the borders of time and human imagination. Although there is no longer a vestige of the majestic statue that once dominated the port of Rhodos, its image has lasted through the pages of literature and brushstrokes of the artists. The Colossus, a bronze titan, has been the protagonist of innumerable artistic and literary representations, carrying with him the legacy of an ancient civilization that no longer exists, but whose story is still alive. The Colossus was not only a symbol of the city of Rhodes, but also a reflection of the soul of an era that he believed in the gods and in the human ability to build the impossible. In art, the figure of Helios extending his arms over the port became an icon of grandiosity. Painters and sculptors over the centuries have been attracted to their image, fascinated by the idea of such a powerful god that could challenge gravity and time. In literature, the Colossus has been mentioned as an emblem of resistance, hope and, at the same time, human fragility. The first literary vestiges of the Colossus of Rhodes come from the works of authors such as Plinio el Viejo, who in his Natural History describes the statue as one of the wonders of the world. Plinio, always attentive to the wonders and curiosities of the ancient world, spoke of the magnitude of the statue, recounting how the navigators who arrived on the island of Rhodes could not cease to be amazed at the imposing figure of Helios. According to him, the statue had been erected as a kind of offering to the gods after the victory of the Rhodes over an invading army. Plinio's work not only documented the existence of the Colossus, but also granted an eternal life, immortalizing the image of the statue in Western literature. However, the Colossus not only lived in the pages of the ancient chroniclers. In the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the figure of the statue was reimagined through the eyes of new artists who tried to capture their essence. For centuries, the image of Rhodos's Colossus served as a constant inspiration in the art of sculpture and painting. Artists such as Antonio del Pollaiuolo and Giovanni Battista Tiepolo sought to represent the titanic figure of Helios with its great height and majesty, seeking not only to reflect the greatness of the original statue, but also capture the power and symbolism of the divinity it represented. The idea of a giant figure that stands over the sea, looking at the horizon with an extended arm, became a metaphor for domination and surveillance, but also of the inevitable fall of the great empires. In the painting, the Colossus has been represented in scenes that explore the passage of time and destiny. In many of these works, the statue appears as a lighthouse that guides navigators, symbolizing both divine protection and the fragility of human existence. Through the centuries, artists and writers have imagined how the figure of Helios, with their almost celestial presence, reflected the struggle between life and death, power and decline. In Baroque art, for example, the statue was painted in situations of instability and collapse, as a warning that even the most imposing structures of humanity are not immune to the passage of time. In modern literature, the Colossus has remained a fascinating figure. In works of contemporary writers, it has been given a new interpretation, away from the historical description to turn it into a symbol deeper and more philosophical. In novels and stories, the Colossus has become a reflection of the human struggle for greatness, a reminder that even the most extraordinary achievements can be destroyed by forces that are out of our control. In some modern versions, the Colossus is no longer only a statue that collapses, but a symbol of the inevitability of destiny, human arrogance, and the fragility of our own constructions. The Colossus has also been a source of inspiration for poets, who have explored in their verses the image of the broken statue, the colossal figure that fell into pieces but whose presence still resonates in collective memory. Poems that tell their fall have been a way to reflect on the transient of the achievements and vanity of the great conquests. Through words, the Colossus is still standing in front of the sea, a reminder that absolute power is just an illusion. Poets like Pablo Neruda, reflecting on the passage of time, have found in the image of the Colossus a perfect metaphor for structures that, despite their greatness, inevitably crumble. In cinema and in popular culture, Rhodes's Colossus remains a relevant figure. It is often mentioned or visualized as a symbol of the fight against the impossible or as a historical reference to the great civilizations that once dominated the ancient world. In adventure films, the Colossus has been represented as a mystical statue that keeps ancient secrets, or as one of the wonders that the heroes must find. These representations continue the legacy of the statue, keeping their figure in popular culture alive, although the original has disappeared centuries ago. Each mention of Rhodes's Colossus, either in modern literature, art or culture, feeds a flame that never goes out. Although the Colossus no longer rises on Rhodes, his presence is still in force, sculpted in the minds of those who have represented or talk about him. The figure of the Colossus is not only that of a fallen statue, but that of a symbol that resists, which continues to grow in the imagination of those who contemplate it, an eternal reminder of greatness and the fragility of humanity. The Colossus of Rhodes, which in its splendor had been a lighthouse of power and protection for the navigators of the Aegean, saw its magnificence fading before a force of uncontrollable nature. Standing, proud and challenging, the Colossus kept the port of the island, a bronze giant that seemed to challenge the same sky. But the earth, which also has its own secrets and desires, had other plans. A tremor of the earth swept everything that the man had built, and the Colossus was no exception. 226 BC, a devastating earthquake hit Rhodes Island, and the footprints of its strength still resonate in the stories that have reached us. That brutal shaking, which shudders in ancient stories, ended the pride of the island. The Colossus, which had erected with such greatness, began to fall, torn by the fury of nature. The witnesses of that time, who so deeply believed in the gods and the symbols of their power, saw how the statue of Helios collapsed, departing in two while their great arms fell to the ground. The image of the Colossus collapsing not only meant the fall of a physical structure, but also the symbolic defeat of humanity against the uncontrollable forces of the universe. And then, the statue, which had been built to resist the onslaught of the sea and the passage of time, could not resist the violent hug of the earth. How could it be possible for something so great to fall so steep? The answer is, perhaps, the same that lies in the heart of all the great myths: the fatality of the gods, the inevitability of destiny, and the reminder that even the greatest is not safe from impermanence. What remained of the Colossus were only fragments, pieces of bronze scattered throughout the port, with his face and broken arms, but with a presence that still seemed powerful. That figure that once illuminated the horizon with its majesty had become ruins, as if fate had even wanted to humiliate even the greatest creations of man. Over the centuries, various stories tried to explain the fall of the Colossus. The earthquake was the most common explanation, but there were always those who thought their destruction was more than a simple natural accident. Some, like Roman historians, affirmed that the statue had fallen due to lack of respect for the gods, which, in their anger, had sent the earthquake as punishment. There were those who believed that the Colossus had been a manifestation of human arrogance, and as such, his fall was a sign that all power, however great it was aroused to fall before the force of nature or divine whim. Esoteric and mystical theories were also woven around the destruction of the Colossus. Some said that Rhodes's Colossus was cursed, that he had been built on sacred land and that, therefore, he could not stand for a long time. Others suggested that the statue had been destroyed not by a physical earthquake, but by a hidden force, an ancestral power that demanded what belonged to it. Perhaps the Colossus had been a symbol of something bigger, a reflection of human arrogance before the gods, and his fall was predestined as a lesson of humility. However, the end of the Colossus was not just physical. The fall of the statue marked the beginning of an era of change for Rhodes. The island, which had been a center of power and commerce, saw its influence decrease after the destruction of the monument. The port, which had previously been guarded by the figure of Helios, lost part of its symbolic power, and over the centuries, the Colossus of Rhodes was forgotten by many, although its shadow continued to persist throughout history. The fragments of the statue were sold as treasures to different parts of the world. According to the ancient chronicles, the Colossus remains were finally bought by a Jewish merchant, who paid a large sum for the pieces. However, although the pieces of the statue were dispersed, the essence of the Colossus remained alive in the minds of those who knew his glory. The Colossus, although broken, left an indelible mark on the heart of the Hellenic civilization and in the legends that were woven around him. Despite its destruction, the Colossus never disappeared completely. His story, his fall, his glow, have been eternally captured in the minds of poets, artists, and narrators over the centuries. His image is still alive in literature and art, representing the fight against the impossible, the fragility of the great, and the transience of human glory. And while the Colossus fragments rest in oblivion, their legend continues to be one of the wonders that, although destroyed, continue to shine strongly in the stories of the centuries. Babylon, a city whose greatness was recorded in the annals of history as a lighthouse of culture and power, rose in the vast plain between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in ancient Mesopotamia. Known for its wealth, its architectural splendor, and its religious influence, Babylon was more than a simple metropolis. It was the epicenter of an empire that marked the fate of an entire region. At its peak, Babylon was a vibrant place, full of life, art, and science. The walls of the city, so imposing and proud, seemed to challenge the gods, as if the city itself were an extension of divine power on earth. Its architecture, which combined the monumental with the sublime, was testimony of a people that not only wanted to dominate the physical world, but also the spiritual universe. Each brick, each structure, each space was impregnated with a deep meaning, a reflection of the connection that the Babylonians felt between heaven and earth. The doors of Babylon, like the famous Ishtar door, were jewels of engineering and art, decorated with dragons and bulls, mythological animals that symbolized the power of the gods. The streets were full of shops, markets, and temples, and in each corner there seemed to be something to talk about the great empire that dominated. But the highlight of Babylon was, without a doubt, his hanging gardens, a wonder that dazzled all who saw her. Babylon's influence, however, was not limited to his impressive infrastructure. The city was a learning center, a place where astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy flourished. The famous Tower of Babel, with its staggered shape and its imposing height, stood as a symbol of human ambition, which aspired to touch the sky and understand the secrets of the universe. Although today it is not known if it really existed or if it is part of a legend, the tower represents the vision of the Babylonian people, a people who aspired to the divine and the eternal. In Babylonian culture, the gods played a central role. Marduk, the supreme god, was the one who guided Babylon to greatness, and the temple that was dedicated to him, the Esagila, was one of the greatest in the ancient world. Through their beliefs and rituals, the Babylonians tried to win the favor of the gods, believing that their lives depended directly on the wills of these powerful beings. But Babylon's story is not exempt from tragedy. Despite its splendor and wealth, the city was also a victim of its own excesses and the relentless attacks of war. In his fight to maintain control over the region, Babylon was attacked and looted several times, and Amenhotep, in the 7th century BC, fell under the domain of the Persians. The great Babylonian Empire was reduced to ruins, and many of its wonders were destroyed or lost over time. Over the centuries, the memory of Babylon lasts in the legends and stories of nearby peoples. It became a symbol of greatness and fall, of the boom and decline, of the ephemeral and the eternal. The ruins of Babylon, with their ancient palaces and temples, were subject to admiration for archaeologists and explorers of later times, who tried to decipher the secrets of this lost civilization. Today, Babylon is still one of the greatest wonders of the ancient world, not only for what he was, but also for what he represented. Its history is a reminder of human aspirations, of the search for the divine and the transcendental, and how greatness can fade in the blink of an eye, leaving only echoes of what once was. The history of the pendant gardens of Babylon is one of the most fascinating and enigmatic of antiquity, surrounded by a veil of mystery that, even today, remains unveiled completely. If they were a real wonder or simply a legend created by the stories of travelers and poets, it still remains in the air. The controversy about its existence has captured the imagination of entire generations, who have wondered if one day those hanging gardens, described as a masterpiece of engineering, really existed or if everything was an invention. The first stories of the gardens come from the Greek writers, who, fascinated by the opulence of Babylon, described these gardens as a series of staggered terraces full of exotic plants and water sources that hung in the air, as if the garden challenged the laws of gravity. According to these stories, the gardens would have been built by King Nebuchadnezzar II in the 6th century BC. For his wife, Amenhotep, who, it is said, missed the vegetation of his homeland, Medium, a mountainous place and full of green landscapes. With her love and devotion for her, Nebuchadnezzar would have ordered the creation of a wonder that not only reminds her beloved home, but also demonstrated the power and wealth of Babylon. But here the controversy begins. Despite the detailed descriptions of the gardens, there is no concrete archaeological evidence that confirms their existence. No vestige has been found in Babylon that corresponds to the magnificence of the gardens as described by ancient stories. The ruins of the city, which include palaces and temples, have been excavated and studied thoroughly, but the gardens remain a shadow in history, an idea rather than a tangible reality. Some historians and archaeologists suggest that the gardens never existed in Babylon at all. According to them, the history of the gardens could have been an invention of the Greeks, who, impressed by the greatness of Babylon, created an idealized story of what they expected to find in the city. For some, the gardens are nothing more than a metaphor for the opulence of Babylonian civilization, an impossible dream that only existed in collective imagination. Others, however, defend the idea that gardens were a real construction, although perhaps not exactly as described by ancient stories. There are theories that suggest that the gardens could have been built in a different location, as in the nearby Palacio de Nabonido in the city of U, or that they could have been a kind of inner garden within a large palace. However, none of these theories has concluded the existence of gardens as described in ancient texts. Another possible explanation for the mystery of the gardens is that what really existed were not hanging gardens in the literal sense, but a series of terraces gardens that were at different levels, interspersed with advanced irrigation systems. Some scholars suggest that, given the arid climate of the region, the gardens could have been ingeniously built to take advantage of the water of the Euphrates River, using a series of channels and pumps to make vegetation possible in such an inhospitable environment. In this case, what the ancient Greeks described as pendant could have interpreted as a series of terraces in which plants grew in a staggered way, creating the illusion of a garden suspended in the air. Over the centuries, many have tried to solve the mystery of the gardens. Some have proposed that the lack of archaeological evidence is due to the destruction of the gardens in later times, as a result of natural invasions or disasters. Babylon was looted and destroyed several times throughout their history, and it is possible that the gardens have been razed or simply disappeared over time. Despite the many theories and speculation, the truth is that the pendant gardens of Babylon are still one of the great unknowns of ancient history. Some consider them one of the greatest wonders ever created, while others believe they are just a romantic legend, a glorious myth that has survived throughout the centuries. However, regardless of whether the gardens really existed or not, their legacy endures. They have inspired countless generations to dream of a world of beauty and opulence, a place where nature and engineering bind so perfectly that water flows between the branches of the trees suspended in the air. Thus, hanging gardens remain a symbol of human ambition, of the search for perfection, and the ability to create wonders that, even if they are ephemeral, leave an indelible mark on history. Whether or not they exist, its impact on culture and the collective imaginary has endured, demonstrating that sometimes, legends are as powerful as realities. The pendant gardens of Babylon, if they existed, were a masterpiece of engineering and architectural design, which combined the beauty of nature with a complex advanced hydraulic technology to survive in an arid environment. Although the exact details about its construction remain a mystery, what is known is that these gardens would have required extraordinary solutions to make their existence possible in the middle of the Babylonian desert. The key to its creation resided in irrigation technology, an impressive achievement for the time. The Babylon of the 6th century BC, under the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar II, was a place where engineering and architecture joined to create wonders. The desert that surrounded the city presented a significant challenge: the arid soil and the lack of natural water sources that could feed large gardens. Therefore, hydraulic technology played a fundamental role in the construction and maintenance of hanging gardens. The city of Babylon, located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, not only depended on these rivers for their basic needs, but also used them for monumental projects like this. The irrigation system that would have been used in the gardens probably involved a series of channels and ditches that brought water from the Euphrates River to the city and, finally, to the gardens. Some ancient stories suggest that the gardens were located on high terraces, so, to water the plants that grew on the upper floors, a system capable of transporting water would be needed through distances and considerable heights. This is where the Babylonian ingenuity comes into play. One of the most accepted theories is that the Babylonians used an Archimedes screw system, a hydraulic machine capable of extracting water from a lower level and raising it to a higher level. This device, later invented in ancient Greece, could have been adapted and used to pump the river water to the garden's terraces. However, some scholars believe that Babylonians could have used an even more primitive but equally effective variant, a system of inclined channels that, by gravity, allowed water to flow into the gardens of the upper terraces. Water was the essential element that kept the gardens alive. Without constant supply, the vegetation would not have survived in the warm climate of Babylon. It is believed that the Babylonians developed a sophisticated water storage system, with underground tanks or deposits that collected and stored the water during seasonal rains or even when the river reached its largest flow. In this way, they could guarantee a continuous flow of water to plants, even in times of drought. For the terraces, the challenge was not only to bring water but also distribute it efficiently among the different plants. The design of the garden should consider a distribution channel system, together with careful planning of the types of plants that could survive and prosper in that environment. The Babylonians must have designed staggered gardens, with plants at different levels, allowing the largest to benefit from the largest amount of sunlight and the smallest received enough shadow. This arrangement also helped the water be distributed uniformly among the plants, creating a landscape in which the vegetation seems to float on the terraces, sustained only by the magic of Babylonian engineering. The material used in the construction of the terraces and the jareens should also be adequate to support both the weight of the earth and the constant flow of water. It is believed that the Babylonians used a combination of cooked bricks, stone, and wood to create the structures of the terraces, along with a waterproof layer that prevented the water from leaking. The waterproofing of the terraces was essential for the irrigation system to work without causing floods or erosion in the structures. The use of plants was also part of the hydraulic strategy. Babylonians, experts in the cultivation of various plant species, carefully chose plants that could adapt to extreme heat conditions and humidity oscillations. A balance between lush vegetation and drought resistance was necessary, ensuring that the gardens were not only visually impressive, but also sustainable over time. Irrigation was not only a technical aspect, it was a reflection of the skill and creativity of the Babylonian people, which managed to transform the arid landscape into a greenery oasis. The conjunction of architecture and engineering in the pendant gardens of Babylon represents one of the most extraordinary achievements of humanity in antiquity, a testament of human ingenuity and how, even in the most difficult conditions, people have found ways of flourishing. Thus, the gardens, with their mixture of nature and advanced technology, would have been a spectacular vision and lush environment in the heart of a desert. With water flowing through the terraces, the plants reaching unthinkable heights, and the sun bathing everything in a golden brightness, the hanging gardens would not only have been a visual wonder, but also a symbol of the human domain over nature and capacity to transform the environment. Without a doubt, the irrigation system and the hydraulic architecture of the hanging gardens would have been as impressive as the gardens themselves. The pendant gardens of Babylon, real or imaginary, have left a deep and lasting impact on the collective imagination of humanity. Throughout the centuries, these green wonders have transcended their time and place, becoming a symbol of opulence, ingenuity, and human ability to dream beyond the possible. Even today, in a world full of advanced technologies and futuristic urban landscapes, hanging gardens continue to be an emblem of what can be achieved when creativity and ambition combine. From the first mentions in the historical stories, the gardens were described with a mixture of amazement and mystery. The chronicles attribute their creation to King Nebuchadnezzar II, who supposedly built them to satisfy the nostalgia of his wife Amytes by the green mountains of his homeland. Although there are no definitive archaeological evidence of its existence, the mere idea of these gardens has lit the imagination of historians, poets, and artists throughout generations. In ancient literature, the gardens were described as an earthly paradise, a place where nature and engineering lived in perfect harmony. The idea of a green oasis in the middle of the desert captivated authors such as Herodoto and Barroso, who detailed the majesty of their terraces, the shadows of their fruit trees, and the relaxing sound of water flowing through their channels. These descriptions created an ideal that would inspire many cultures to imitate their magnificence. The legacy of the hanging gardens is not limited only to literature. In architecture and landscape design, its influence is palpable. Staggered gardens, green terraces, and advanced irrigation systems that are used in modern parks have roots in innovations attributed to Babylonian gardens. This architectural style, which combines the natural with the constructed, has served as a model for sustainable urbanization projects, reminding us that even the most modern cities can learn from the ingenuity of the past. Beyond its tangible impact, the gardens became a symbol of human aspiration. They represented the ability of ancient Babylonians to transform a hostile environment into a space of beauty and tranquility. This message resonates in the present, reminding us that humanity has the power to overcome apparently insurmountable challenges through creativity and collective effort. In art, hanging gardens have been interpreted in numerous paintings, engravings, and sculptures throughout history. Medieval and Renaissance artists, in particular, represented them as a fantasy place, with clear skies, exotic plants, and mythical figures that roamed the terraces. These images not only captured the imagination of the people of their time, but also reinforced the idea that the gardens were more than a physical structure, they were a bridge towards a higher ideal. The myth of hanging gardens has also inspired modern writers, who have used them as a backdrop in novels, movies, and plays. In many cases, the gardens symbolize nostalgia for a golden past or the search for a lost paradise. These narratives reflect the emotional connection that humanity has with nature and its desire to preserve it against modernization and climate change. The impact of hanging gardens can also be found in contemporary ecological movements. In a world faced with increasing environmental challenges, the example of a green space built with advanced technology and respect for nature offers an inspiring vision. Projects such as vertical gardens in modern buildings, green ceilings, and sustainable urban parks take elements of Babylon's legacy, adapting them to the needs of the 21st century. Even in the absence of material evidence, the legend of the hanging gardens continues to grow. Archaeology and history have tirelessly sought clues about their existence, and every new theory or finding feeds the global fascination for this issue. The discussions about whether the gardens were in Babylon, Nineveh, or even if they existed at all have only amplified their mystery and place in popular culture. Ultimately, Babylonian gardens represent more than a physical place. They embody the human capacity to imagine, create, and overcome limits. His legacy lives in each attempt to beautify the urban environment, in each effort to reconcile modernity with nature, and in each dream of building something that transcends time. The gardens may have disappeared physically, but their spirit continues to flourish in the imagination of those who believe that even in the most difficult circumstances, beauty can find its place. Ephesus, bathed by the golden light of the Mediterranean sun, was much more than a simple city of antiquity. It was a place where the divine seemed to be intertwined with the earthly, where the echoes of a deep devotion resonated in each stone, every street, and every corner. This city, located in what is Turkey today, flourished as an epicenter of commerce, art, and religion, but his soul vibrated to the rhythm of Artemisa, the goddess of hunting, nature, and fertility. The Ephesus foundation is wrapped in the veil of myths. It is said that the first communities were guided by the Amazons, the legendary warriors who found on this land a sacred place. Artemisa, her protector, became the spiritual essence of the city. Over the centuries, Ephesus grew and prospered under the shadow of this deity, attracting pilgrims from all over the ancient world who came to pay tribute to one of the most magnificent temples ever constructed. The Artemis Temple was not just an architectural wonder, it was a symbol of faith, power, and community. Built and rebuilt several times due to natural disasters and conflicts, this sanctuary was a masterpiece of engineering, decorated with intricate friezes and sculptures that glorified the goddess. The columns, very high and sculpted in detail, held a roof that seemed to touch the sky, as if trying to approach the heavenly home of Artemis. However, Artemis' cult was not limited to the splendor of the temple. In every corner of Ephesus, his presence was palpable. The festivals in his honor, full of music, dances, and sacrifices, joined the community in a collective celebration of the divine. Artisans created delicate statuettes of the goddess, which were then taken as offerings or saved as talismans. The markets were filled with merchants who sold amulets and memories related to Artemis, while priests and priestesses led ceremonies loaded with symbolism. The daily life in Ephesus revolved around this spiritual connection. Artemisa was not just a distant goddess, she was a nearby protector, a cosmic mother who offered comfort and guides her followers. Women, especially, felt a deep connection with her, seeing her as a symbol of strength and freedom. It was said that pregnant women went to the temple in search of their blessing for a safe delivery, and the young women promised their dreams and hopes to the goddess, trusting in her protective power. However, Ephesus was also a place of contrasts. Although the cult of Artemis was central, the city was open to other cultural and religious influences. The Romans, who later dominated the region, integrated Artemis with their own goddess Diana, giving the cult a broader dimension. This syncretism enriched the spirituality of Ephesus, but also marked the beginning of a transformation that over time would dilute its original devotion. The decline of Artemis's cult began with the rise of Christianity. Ephesus, which in its peak had been a refuge for paganism, became a key center for the early Christians. According to tradition, the Apostle Paul preached here, and the Virgin Mary lived her last days in the nearby hills. The tension between these two beliefs was intense, with episodes of conflicts and conversions that marked an irreversible change in the spiritual identity of the city. Today, the ruins of Ephesus tell a story of greatness and devotion that has not been forgotten. Although the temple no longer rises majestic, its essence lasts in the collective memory of humanity. Walking through the remains of this old city is an act of connection with those who, centuries ago, looked at the sky looking for the favor of Artemis. It is a reminder of how a community can find in the divine strength to build something that transcends time. And while the winds travel through the worn stones of Ephesus, it seems that they still whisper their name, keeping alive the spirit of a city that was once a sanctuary of faith and hope. In the heart of Ephesus, between the echoes of an ancient civilization and the whispers of the Aegean Sea, a wonder that seemed to challenge the limits of human imagination, the Temple of Artemisa. This structure was not just a place of worship, it was a will of the ambition, devotion, and technical ability of those who built it. Each stone, each column, and every architectural detail was an ode to the goddess Artemis, a statement of her greatness and a reflection of human aspiration towards the sublime. The construction of the temple, in its greatest version, began around the 6th century BC. Under the sponsorship of King Craso who spared no resources to honor the goddess. A swampy land was carefully chosen to build it, not by chance, but with the intention of protecting it from earthquakes, a testimony of the ingenuity of their designers. Chersiphron, the architect in charge, along with his son Metageon, devised a design that would revolutionize the architecture of his time. The temple dimensions were impressive, overcoming any other building of the time. With 127 marble columns, each of 18 meters high, the temple was extended by more than 110 meters long and 55 wide, rivaling even with the modern constructions in its majesty. The columns not only supported the structure, they were decorated with intricate reliefs that narrated mythological stories, showing the artistic skill of the sculptors. The marble, extracted from nearby quarries, shone under the sun, giving the temple an ethereal appearance. During the night, it was said that the light of the torches made the polished surface of the marble shine as if the goddess itself radiate her glory from her sanctuary. Inside, there was the Artemis statue, a masterpiece made of gold, silver, ebony, and ivory, which represented the goddess in all its magnificence. His multiple arms and ornaments, symbols of fertility and abundance, were revered by the pilgrims who came from all over the ancient world. The temple design was not just aesthetic, it was also functional. The artisans and architects used advanced techniques to guarantee their durability. The foundations, built with coal and wool layers, helped distribute the weight and protected the structure of moisture. Pulley and ramp systems were used to move and place the marble blocks, a technical achievement that continues to amaze archaeologists and modern engineers. The temple was also a social and economic center. More than a place of worship, it worked as a space where the Ephesians and visitors gathered, traded, and celebrated festivals. The festival in honor of Artemisa, known as Artemisia, attracted crowds that filled the streets of Ephesus with dances, music, and offerings. In these festivities, the temple was not only the main stage, but the vibrant heart of the city. However, not everything was peace and devotion in the history of the temple. In the year 356 BC, a man named Herostrat fired the structure in an act of vandalism with the intention of immortalizing his name. Paradoxically, its crime led to the history of the temple to be told for centuries. Alexander the Great, who was born on the same night of the fire, offered to rebuild the temple as a gift, but the Ephesians rejected their offer, preferring to honor the goddess with her own efforts. the reconstruction had been, but the new temple got up more splendid than ever, reaffirming its place as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. His magnificence inspired writers and artists of later generations, who described him as a wonder that could not be matched by ninguna another construction. Today, the Artemis Temple no longer rises in all its splendor. The ruins that remain, although modest, are silent witnesses of an era when faith, creativity, and human ingenuity converged to create something that transcended time. When touring this place, one cannot avoid feeling a connection with those who, centuries ago, worked with devotion to lift a monument that challenges the limits of the possible. In each marble fragment, in each fallen stone, the echo of a greatness that will never be forgotten. The Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, was not only a symbol of religious devotion and architectural mastery, but also a scenario of repeated attacks and reconstruction efforts that deeply marked its history. Through the centuries, the magnificence of the temple attracted both admiration and greed, and the scars of its destruction reflect the fragility of even the greatest human creations. The first big blow to the temple occurred in 356 BC, in a deliberate act of destruction that shuddered the ancient world. Herostrato, an unknown man until that moment, set the temple on fire with the sole purpose of ensuring that his name was recorded in history. Although the Ephesians tried to erase their memory by prohibiting their name from pronouncing, the Herostrato Act became a timeless warning about the destructive search for fame. That night, also marked by the birth of Alexander the Great, left the temple in ruins and a deep emptiness in the heart of Ephesus. The devastating fire not only consumed the temple, but also the spirit of the Ephesians. However, instead of surrendering to the loss, the city joined to rebuild what had been destroyed. With the support of the community and the sponsorship of rich citizens, restoration work began. The architects designed an even more imposing temple, using higher quality materials and perfecting the decorative details. This reconstruction was not only a declaration of faith in Artemis, but also a message of resistance to adversity. Despite the renewed efforts to preserve the temple, the following centuries brought new threats. The growing influence of the Roman Empire and the expansion of Christianity represented a challenge for pagan cults and their monuments. During the 3rd century AD, the Goths, a Germanic tribe that advanced by Asia Minor, looted ethics and caused serious damage to the temple. Although they did not completely destroy the structure, they left visible scars that reflected the vulnerability of even the most imposing monuments. As Christianity consolidated as the dominant religion of the Roman Empire, the perception of the temple changed dramatically. What was previously a place of devotion and pilgrimage became a symbol of beliefs considered pagan. In the 4th century AD, under the reign of Emperor Theodosius I, the temple was officially closed as part of paganism policies. The stones that once sustained the pride of Ephesus were dismantled and reused to build churches and other buildings, reflecting the irreversible change in the religious and cultural landscape of the region. With each attack and each reconstruction, the Temple of Artemis accumulated a history rich in contrasts, a testament of human capacity to create and destroy, to remember and forget. Today, when walking among the scattered remains of what was once one of the greatest wonders of the world, one cannot avoid imagining the hands that raised their columns and those that knocked them down. It is a powerful reminder that even the most monumental creations are subject to the forces of time, faith, and human ambition. And as long as the temple no longer rises, its history endures as a lesson in the fragility and greatness of our humanity. The Artemis Temple in Ephesus was not only an architectural jewel of the ancient world, but also a deeply intertwined place with Greek mythology. Its existence was destined to honor one of the most complex and venerated deities of the Greek pantheon, Artemis, the goddess of hunting, wild nature, and the protection of life. But Artemis was much more than a protective figure. His dual character, which ranged between purity and ferocity, gave the temple a symbolism that resonated in each stone and in each ritual made in his honor. Artemisa was the daughter of Zeus and Leto, and Apollo's twin sister. From the moment of her birth, she stood out as a different goddess. According to the myth, hardly born, he helped his mother give birth to his brother Apollo, which linked her forever with maternal care and the protection of vulnerable. This protective facet was one of the most celebrated aspects in Ephesus, where women went to the temple in search of blessings for fertility and birth assistance. Artemis's image in this context was that of a kind goddess, who gave her help to those who faced the challenges of bringing new life to the world. However, Artemis was also fearsome, a goddess who demanded absolute respect. The myths describe her as vindictive and fierce with whom they offended or violated her domains. One of the best-known stories is Actaeon, a hunter who, by accident, saw the goddess bathing naked. Enraged, Artemis transformed him into a deer, and his own hunting dogs devoured him. This episode underlined its untouchable character and the importance of maintaining purity and respect for it, values that the inhabitants of Ephesus tried to reflect in the ceremonies made in their honor. The temple itself reflected these dual aspects of Artemis. The majestic columns and the intricate reliefs not only celebrated their beauty and power, but also warned about their darkest side. The processions and sacrifices that took place in the sanctuary sought both to please her and appease her, because the goddess could be a generous ally or an implacable enemy. In Ephesus, Artemisa was known as Artemisa Ephesia, a particular version of the goddess that combined Greek aspects with local influences in the Anatolia region. His representation in this temple was different from the Artemis commonly associated with hunting. Here, she was a mother goddess, with multiple breasts, symbol of fertility and abundance, surrounded by animals that showed her connection with nature. The cult of Artemis was also deeply linked to the moon, another symbol associated with the goddess. The silver light of the moon that illuminated the temple at night seemed to remind the faithful of their constant, vigilant and mysterious presence. Just as the moon influenced the tides, it was also believed that Artemis influenced the cycles of life, marking the balance between birth and death, hunting and protection, creation and destruction. Myths also say that Artemisa protected the sanctuary of their enemies. A less-known story narrates that, during an attempt to loot from the temple, the goddess appeared in the form of a giant deer, confusing the invaders and saving the place of destruction. Although this legend can be seen as a fiction created to exalt their power, it shows how much the Ephesians believed in the active presence of its goddess, even in the most critical moments. The Artemis Temple was not only a place of worship, but a space where mythology became life, where the faithful could feel the presence of a goddess who was both protective and dangerous, beautiful and terrifying. The stories about Artemis and his temple were transmitted from generation to generation, recording in collective memory as a reminder of the force of the divine in the life of mortals. The white columns that shone under the moon were a tangible reflection of the legends, a bridge between myths and reality. Thus, the temple rose not only as a tribute to the goddess, but as an eternal symbol of interaction between men and gods, a connection that, although often incomprehensible, defined the very existence of those who lived under their shadow. The history of Artemis and his temple continues to beating, whispering the echoes of a time in which myths gave meaning to the world. In the heart of the Peloponnese, between the soft hills and serene rivers, there was Olympia, a sacred and majestic city that housed the first Olympic Games. It was not just a place of competition, but an epicenter where the human and the divine converged in an unparalleled celebration. Every 4 years, men of all Greek cities traveled there to honor Zeus, the king of the gods, and demonstrate his worth in competencies that went far beyond physical strength. They were a tribute to excellence, the virtue and glory. Olympia's story is intertwined with legends. It was said that Zeus himself had established this place as a symbol of his power after beating Kronos. The vast esplanade of the sanctuary housed temples, altars, and statues dedicated to deities. But what distinguished Olympia was his Olympic Stadium, a space that could bring together more than 40,000 spectators, anxious for witnessing human greatness in its purest form. The Olympic Games had a deep meaning. They were not merely a sports competition, they were a sacred truce. During the period of the Games, the wars ceased, and the enemies gathered under the same sky, united by mutual respect and devotion to the gods. Participating in the Games was an indescribable honor, reserved only for free men and Greek citizens. The women, meanwhile, had their own games, known as the Heroic Games, in honor of Hera. Olympic events were varied and challenging. From the stadium race, a pure speed test, to the pentathlon, which combined disciplines such as the jump, the launch of the disc and the fight. One of the most impressive was the race of cars, where the horses galloped with force and elegance, while the drivers maneuvered with skill. The prize for the victors was not gold or jewels, but an olive crown, a symbol of peace and victory, which awarded them immortality in the memory of their people. The city of Olympia was filled with life during the games. The markets overflowed with merchants offering exotic products, the poets recited athletes, and the families gathered under the shadows of the centenary olive trees. But, at the same time, a solemn air of respect was breathed. In the Altis, the sacred enclosure, the athletes swore to compete with honor in front of the statue of Zeus Horkios, the guardian of the oaths. Olympia's greatness was not limited to games. The Zeus Temple, with its colossal ivory and gold statue, was one of the wonders of the ancient world. The travelers were amazed by the magnitude of the figure of the god, sitting on their throne with an air of unwavering power. His gaze seemed to remind mortals the insignificance of their earthly disputes against the eternal. With the passing of the centuries, the Olympic Games lost their original splendor. The arrival of the Romans and the subsequent expansion of Christianity marked the decline of this pagan ritual. However, the spirit of Olympia, his legacy of unity and fair competition, lasts. Today, although the ruins of the stadium and the temples barely whisper stories of the past, Olympia's name remains synonymous with excellence and the search for greatness. Would you like to remember this emotional and historical approach you are using to tell the history and myths of ancient wonders? I could help you maintain the same essence in future chapters. In the heart of Olympia, under the majestic roof of the Zeus Temple, there was a work that seemed to challenge the mortality itself, the statue of Zeus. This wonder, created by the famous sculptor Phidias, was more than a representation of the king of the gods. It was a statement of human greatness, of its ability to pay tribute to the divine with a magnificence that brushed the heavenly. The statue stood on a throne made with intricate details, reaching an imposing height of approximately 12 meters. Only with lifting their eyes, the spectators felt tiny, almost insignificant against the presence of Zeus. It was said that the god was sitting, not because they wanted it that way, but because having stood up, his head would have gone through the ceiling of the temple. This detail was not accidental. He reflected the belief that the gods not only dominated the earth, but also the heavens and everything that surrounded them. The material used for the construction of this wonder was as sublime as its design. Phidias used ivory for the skin of the god, giving him a pure white tone that seemed to shine with his own light. This ivory, obtained from elephant fangs, was a rarity even at that time, which increased the value and exclusivity of the work. For clothing and ornaments, pure gold was used, carefully worked to give the illusion of movement and texture. The tunic that partially covered God seemed to wave with a non-existent breeze, while the olive crown that adorned his head symbolized peace and victory. The throne on which Zeus rested was a work of art in itself. Made with cedar wood, it was adorned with ivory, gold, and precious stones. The throne legs were carved with images of sphinxes and other mythological creatures, such as a reminder of the connection between the human and the divine. In addition, scenes of Greek myths were represented, which told stories of courage, betrayal, and redemption, wrapping the viewer in a world of legends. The construction process of this statue was as meticulous as it is amazing. Phidias worked within a workshop specially designed in Olympia, where he joined the pieces with a precision that challenged the tools of the time. Wood structures were used as internal support, while the outer layers of ivory and gold were assembled with a delicacy that seemed more work of the gods than of men. Every detail, from the folds of the tunic to the serene but powerful expression of Zeus's face, reflected the incomparable talent of Phidias. Zeus's expression was a point of discussion among those who contemplated the statue. Some said that God seemed benevolent, willing to grant favors to mortals who venerated him. Others, however, felt unwavering power, a warning silent of his authority over the world. This dualism in his representation reinforced the idea that Zeus was not only the protector of humanity, but also his supreme judge. The room where the statue was designed to increase the feeling of astonishment. Natural light was leaked through carefully placed openings, creating reflections on golden surfaces and giving life to the ivory that covered the statue. In the religious festivities, the room was filled with the aroma of the incense and the echo of songs that seemed to wrap the figure of Zeus, making it the center of a spiritual experience that transcended the earthly. Although the statue of Zeus disappeared over time, its legacy persists as a symbol of human creativity and its desire to connect with the eternal. The descriptions of ancient writers and the remains of tools and materials found in the Phidias workshop allow us to glimpse the magnificence of this work, reminding us that, in its time, it was more than a statue, it was a bridge between mortals and the divine. In the heart of ancient Greece, the figure of Zeus represented much more than a powerful god. It was the central pillar of religion and culture, the symbol of justice and the balance that governed not only the gods, but also men. The statue of Zeus in Olympia, with its imposing presence, embodied this idea in a tangible way, becoming a lighthouse of faith and cultural pride for all Greeks. Zeus was not just the king of the gods, he was the guardian of the cosmic order. In an era where human laws were constantly evolving, Zeus was seen as the supreme referee, the one who guaranteed that justice prevailed over injustice. His throne was not only a seat, but a symbol of his universal authority. It was the one that punished the hybris, that excessive pride that led mortals to challenge the gods, and the one that rewarded virtue and devotion. The statue of Zeus was not only an artistic representation, it was a physical manifestation of these ideals. When observing it, mortals not only saw a god, but an incarnation of the values that kept society together. Each fold in its golden robe and each serene but imposing look transmitted a clear message: Zeus was always vigilant, willing to balance the balances of the destination. In the context of the Olympic Games, which were held in his honor, Zeus acquired an even deeper meaning. These games were not only sports competitions, but acts of religious devotion. The athletes competed not only for personal glory, but also to honor the god who symbolized justice and excellence. Each victory was seen as a divine favor, a proof that Zeus had granted his blessing to the most worthy. Zeus's cultural meaning was also reflected in his ability to unify the various Greek states. In a world marked by constant conflicts, Zeus was a shared symbol, a figure that transcended political and territorial differences. The Greeks could be at war with each other, but all paid tribute to the god who represented order and justice. The statue of Zeus in Olympia was a visual reminder of this common connection, a testimony of the shared faith that kept the Greek identity alive. In addition, the statue also served as a connection point between the earthly and the divine. For many, it was a way of approaching God, feeling his presence and looking for his favor. The pilgrims who arrived in Olympia to contemplate the statue did it with reverence, carrying offerings and prayers, waiting for Zeus to listen to his pleas and guide their lives. It was a moment of introspection, connection with something bigger than themselves. In art and literature, Zeus was represented as the protector of the fundamental values of society. In her right hand, she held a Nike figure, the goddess of victory, showing that the triumph was the result of justice and devotion. In his left hand, a scepter adorned with an eagle, the bird that symbolized its heavenly power and its ability to observe everything from the heights. These elements were not just ornaments, they were visual narratives that reminded the Greeks of their place in the world and the importance of living in harmony with divine laws. Zeus's impact was not limited to Greece's limits. As the Greek culture expanded through colonies and conquests, so did the image of Zeus as a symbol of power and justice. Even in later times, when the Olympic god ceased to be worshipped, the figure of Zeus continued to be a reference of authority and balance. His legacy was intertwined with philosophy, politics, and arts, demonstrating that its meaning transcended the borders of time. Contemplating the statue of Zeus was more than that an act of aesthetic admiration, it was a spiritual encounter, an experience that invited to reflect on order, justice, and personal responsibility. Zeus was not only a god, it was an ideal, an aspiration that guided mortals in their search for a more fair and balanced world. The disappearance of the majestic statue of Zeus in Olympia is a mystery that continues to fascinate historians, archaeologists, and lovers of antiquity. This colossus of almost 12 meters high, the work of the talented sculptor Phidias, represented not only the power of the king of the gods, but also the human capacity to create wonders of incalculable beauty and meaning. His disappearance, wrapped in shadows and theories, is a reminder of the fragility of even the greatest creations of humanity. It is believed that the statue remained in place in the Temple of Zeus for almost 800 years, being revered by generations. However, in the 4th century AD, the context of the ancient world began to change dramatically. The rise of Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire marked the beginning of a cultural transformation that saw ancient deities as paganism symbols and superstition. The temple, before a devotion center, was abandoned and was exposed to the passage of time and the disinterest of the authorities. One of the most accepted theories argues that the statue was transferred to Constantinople, capital of the Roman Empire of the East, in an attempt to preserve it. In this city, known for his appreciation for the masterpieces of Greek art, he would have placed himself in a palace or in a prominent public space. However, fate was not benevolent with her. It is believed that a devastating fire occurred in 475 AD. It destroyed both the statue and other treasures of incalculable value. This version, although plausible, leaves a bitter taste, since it eliminates the possibility that the statue still exists in some hidden corner of the world. Another theory, less optimistic, suggests that the statue never left Olympia. According to this hypothesis, he was the victim of an earthquake, a frequent natural disaster in the region. The magnitude of such an event would have reduced the temple to rubble, burying under tons of stone and with the imposing figure of Zeus. If this was its destiny, there could be fragments of the statue waiting to be discovered under the layers of land that cover the old Olympia. Looting and deliberate destruction are also possible causes of their disappearance. In times of political and social instability, the ancient temples were looted, and their valuable materials reused. Gold and ivory ornaments of the statue would have been particularly tempting objectives for desperate invaders or inhabitants. The statue itself, made of wood, could have been burned or dismantled for practical purposes. However, a more intriguing possibility is that the statue has been fragmented and transported in secret by devotees who wanted to protect it from destruction. In a world where the persecution of religions and ancient symbols was common, it is conceivable that those who still venerate Zeus tried to save what they could. If this happened, the fragments of the statue could have been hidden somewhere remote, where they remain forgotten. The disappearance of the statue also raises questions about the value we give to works of art and cultural symbols. How could something so monumental miss? Was its destruction an act of negligence, violence, or simply an accident of time? These questions do not have definitive answers, but remind us that even the greatest achievements of humanity are subject to the relentless forces of history and nature. Despite its disappearance, the memory of the statue of Zeus lives in the ancient stories and in the descriptions left by writers such as Pausanias. The image of the god sitting on his throne, with a serene and powerful look, remains a symbol of greatness and artistic perfection. Although we cannot see it, its legacy endures as an inspiration for those who seek to understand the past and value the wonders of human ingenuity. Uncertainty about his final destination only increases his mysticism. The statue, like other wonders of the ancient world, invites us to reflect on the ephemeral of human creations and the importance of preserving them. Will there be still a trace of Zeus hoping to be found, or has it disappeared forever in the dust of history? Perhaps, the true legacy of the statue does not reside in its physical presence, but in the indelible footprint that left in the imagination of humanity. Halicarnassia, a jewel of antiquity, stood imposing on the coast of the Aegean Sea, in what we know today as Bodrum, Turkey. This city, more than a simple settlement, was an epicenter of innovation, culture, and power, standing out as one of the places most important in the ancient world. Its history, woven with glory and tragedy threads, reveals a civilization that merged the Greek and the Persian in a unique tapestry of creativity and influence. The city was founded in the 12th century BC by Greek Dorios, but soon his character evolved beyond his Hellenic roots. Halicarnassia became a cultural crucible, adopting elements of nearby civilizations, such as Persian, which made it a meeting point between the East and West. This mixture not only defined its identity, but also promoted its architectural, political, and social advances. During the 4th century BC, under the dominance of Caria's satrapy, Halicarnassia reached its peak. Mausolo, one of the most prominent leaders in the region, transformed the city into an architectural masterpiece. It was he who decided to transfer the capital of Caria to Halicarnassia, a strategic movement that not only strengthened his political power, but also initiated an era of unprecedented splendor. Under his government, the city flourished, with carefully planned streets, impressive temples, and a fortress that demonstrated its military ingenuity. The construction of the famous Halicarnassia mausoleum, considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, was the greatest testimony of the ambition of Mausolo and his wife Artemisia II. This funeral monument not only served as a place of rest for Mausolo, but also symbolized the greatness and innovation of the city. Designed by the best architects and sculptors of the time, Mausoleum was a work of art that combined Greek and Oriental influences, raising Halicarnassia to the pinnacle of world recognition. Halicarnasso not only stood out for its architecture, it was also a center of thought and innovation. It was the birthplace of Herodotus, that father of history, whose chronicles marked a before and after in the way of narrating historical events. Herodotus captured in his writings the essence of the known world, and his work remains a testimony of the intellectual ingenuity of the city that saw him born. In addition, the city was an important seaport, a vital connection between the commercial routes of the Aegean and Asia Minor. Its bustling docks and vibrant markets attracted merchants from all over the ancient world, which encouraged a constant exchange of ideas, goods, and culture. This economic and cultural dynamism turned Halicarnassus into a cosmopolitan metropolis, where the differences were embraced and transformed into fortress. However, Halicarnasso's story was not exempt from conflicts. Its strategic location made it a coveted prize for expanding empires. Alexander the Great, during his campaign to conquer the Persian Empire, signed the city in the year 334 BC. The siege was brutal, and although Halicarnio resisted bravely, he finally succumbed to the Macedonia's forces. This event marked the beginning of a slow but inevitable decline. Despite partial destruction during the siege, Halicarnasso maintained its importance for centuries. The Romans, and later the Byzantines, left their mark in the city, although the splendor he had reached during the era of Mausolo was never matched. Over time, Mausoleum, symbol of Halicarnasso's greatness, was dismantled and its materials reused in the construction of other structures, such as San Pedro Castle on Bodrum. Today, the ruins of Halicarnasso and its mausoleum tell us about a city that knew how to be a lighthouse of innovation and creativity. The mixture of cultures, the architectural audacity and the legacy of figures such as Mausolo and Herodoto have assured that Halicarnasso remains alive in the collective memory of humanity. Its history reminds us that even in the darkest moments, innovation and perseverance have the power to transcend time, leaving an indelible brand in the world. Among the stones worn by the centuries, one can almost listen to the echo of the voices that once filled its streets, the same ones that dreamed and built a legacy that still inspires those who stop to contemplate it. Halicarnasso's mausoleum, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, is not only a funeral monument, but the will of an eternal love and a political ambition that transcended generations. The central figure of this great structure was Mausolo, the king of Caria, a man whose desire to immortalize his name merged with the unwavering devotion of his wife and sister, Artemisia II. Together, they forged one of the most iconic works of antiquity, which not only reflected the greatness of the monarch, but also the strategic importance of hacking in the geopolitics of the time. Mausolo, born in a noble family, was appointed satrapa de Caria by the Persian Empire. From the beginning of his reign, Mausolo showed a strong sea political character, not only maintaining loyalty towards the Persian Empire, but also expanding its influence. His ability to navigate the complex waters of Persian and Greek politics made him a key figure in the Aegean region, which served as a nexus between Asia Minor and classical Greece. The reign of Mausolo, which covered since 377 BC. Until his death in 353 BC, he witnessed an important cultural and architectural flourishing in Halicarnasso. His political ambition was not only limited to consolidating his power in Caria, but also to raising his city to the category of metropolis. Halicarnasso became a center for culture, commerce and power, under the sponsorship of Mausolo, who did not hesitate to make use of his influence to bring artists, architects and sculptors around the known world. Under his reign, the city prospered, and the king made sure Halicarnasso became a symbol of power, capable of resisting external influences and leaving an indelible mark on history. Mausolo's personal history is deeply intertwined with that of his wife Artemisia II. The love and devotion of Artemisia towards her husband were not mere gestures of affection, but a motivating force behind the mausoleum. When Mausolo died, Artemisia not only faced the loss of his partner and sovereign, but also in charge of continuing the work of his life, making sure that mausoleum was not only a funeral monument, but a symbol of his power and legacy. In a gesture of eternal love, Artemisia supervised the construction of mausoleum, ensuring that its size and magnificence reflected the political and cultural importance of Mausolo. Halicarnasso Mausoleum was designed to be much more than a simple grave. In its structure, both the military and political power of Mausolo was reflected and Caria's cultural and artistic wealth. The structure was approximately 45 meters high and was decorated with impressive details that mixed Greek, Egyptian, and Eastern architectural elements, showing the fusion of cultures that characterized the reign of Mausolo. The design included a monumental base, a column of 36 meters high, and a pyramidal roof, crowned by an equestrian statue of Mausolo, where his figure seemed mounted in a horsepower car, which symbolized his power and leadership. The political impact of mausoleum was deep. In its construction, Mausolo not only made sure that his memory lasts, but also sent a clear message about Caria's power in the region. This work not only served as a funeral monument, but as a visual reminder of the domain of Mausolo over the land she had governed and the loyalty of Artemisia to her husband. For centuries, mausoleum would stand as a symbol of political strength and the determination of the Mausolo dynasty, even when Caria's footprints faded in history. Mausoleum was also a symbol of immortality. In ancient times, funeral monuments not only served to remember the dead, but also were a manifestation of the desires of the living to transcend time. In this sense, Halicarnasso Mausoleum was more than a grave, it was an expression of the eternal search for power, prestige, and survival beyond death. Although the monument was dismantled over time due to several earthquakes, its legacy lasted in the collective memory, and today remains a symbol of the link between love and ambition, between politics and eternity. The history of Mausolo and the mausoleum is not limited to the physical domain of the city. His legacy is the testimony of an era of great aspirations and achievements. In a world where cities were often ephemeral, Halicarnasso Mausoleum represented something much bigger: transcendence. The structure not only commemorated the life of a king, but encapsulated the human yearning to leave a mark on time, a footprint that survived even the most devastating destinations. Halicarnasso Mausoleum was not only a wonder of engineering and architecture, but also a masterpiece of art that merged various cultural and stylistic influences, making him one of the most impressive creations of antiquity. His greatness not only resided in his monumental size, but also in the richness of his artistic details, which made him an aesthetic innovation center. The sculpture and architecture of the mausoleum were responsible for conferring their fame and making him survive in the collective memory of humanity. The mausoleum was commissioned by Artemisia II, Mausolo's wife and sister, after his death in 353 BC. To make sure that her husband's tomb reflected her power and eternal love, Artemisia brought together some of the greatest artists and architects of the time. Under its supervision, mausoleum became a pro-single yet that combined the majesty of architecture with the delicacy and strength of sculpture. Through this artistic collaboration, Halicarnasso's mausoleum became a monument of such beauty that lasts in history as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. As for architecture, mausoleum was an exceptional example of the domain of architects in the use of forms and materials. The Nero architects and Hoare, responsible for the design of the structure, created a rectangular marble base that measured approximately 32 meters long by 27 meters wide. On this basis, a column of 36 meters high was erected, which was crowned by a truncated pyramid. However, what truly made the mausoleum of Halicarnasso was his rich sculptural decoration. Artemisia not only commissioned the construction of the building, but also hired some of the most talented sculptors of the time to design the figures that would decorate the structure. Among these artists were the Greek sculptor Praxiteles, known for his ability to create delicate and detailed figures, and the master sculptor Scopas de Poros, who was famous for his dramatic and realistic representations of human emotion. The mausoleum facade was decorated with a series of reliefs and sculptures that represented mythological and heroic scenes. In the columns of the building, the reliefs represented scenes of battles and fighting, where mythological figures and warriors fought, showing the strength and value of Mausolo and its kingdom. The intention was to create an atmosphere of power and glory, where the viewer felt overwhelmed by the magnificence of the work and the greatness of the deceased king. But it was the equestrian statues of Mausolo and Artemisia that really stood out in the mausoleum. On the roof of the structure, 2 large-scale statues of the monarchs, Mausolo and Artemisia, mounted on their horses, were erected. These statues, sculpted with amazing precision, represented the monarchs as heroic figures, whose power and dignity transcended death. The statues were not only a tribute to the king and his queen, but they were also a representation of the perfect balance between art and politics, a way of immortalizing leaders through art so that their image would last through the centuries. In addition to the reliefs and equestrian statues, the sculptors worked on other figures that adorned the interior walls of the mausoleum. Among these figures, some represented mythological scenes, such as the struggle between good and evil, while others showed the majesty of the Greek gods and heroes. The entire sculptural set of mausoleum was a synthesis of the best artistic traditions of the time, merging elements of the Greek classical sculpture with the influence of Persian and Egyptian culture. One of the most fascinating aspects of Halicarnasso mausoleum art is the way in which the sculptures of their artists managed to convey emotion. The reliefs of the columns not only showed static figures, but captured movement, struggle, and sacrifice, as if the characters in the scenes were alive. The figures of the warriors, for example, were not only formal representations, but seemed to be in full combat, fighting with determination and fury. The skill of sculptors to capture dramatic tension and human emotion in these figures was something completely revolutionary for their time. Mausoleum was not only an eternal resting place for Mausolo, but also a space where art became a vehicle to convey the greatness of a man and the prosperity of a city. Through the collaboration of renowned architects and sculptors, Halicarnasso's mausoleum became an artistic milestone that marked a new era in the history of sculpture and architecture. Today, although the original structure no longer exists, the artistic legacy of the mausoleum of Halicarnio lasts in the memory of humanity. The copies of their sculptures and the detailed descriptions that have reached us allow us to imagine the magnificence of this work, which remains a symbol of human search for leaving a mark on the world through art and architecture. The destruction of Halicarnasso mausoleum is one of the greatest tragedies of antiquity, not only because the monumental structure disappeared, but because one of the purest expressions of the architectural and artistic greatness of humanity was lost. Despite its enormous cultural impact, mausoleum did not resist the passage of time, natural disasters, and the inevitable war. His disappearance not only left a vacuum on the horizon of ancient art, but also marked a turning point in the way in which civilizations understood the permanence of their achievements. The mausoleum was built around 350 BC, but its destruction occurred centuries later. In 1300, a devastating earthquake hit the Halicarnassus region, which caused the columns that supported the majestic structure collapsing part of the truncated pyramid and letting the rest of the construction fall apart. The sculptural figures and the reliefs that adorned the mausoleum, which once were examples of artistic and technical skill, disintegrated and dispersed. The strength of the disaster was such that much of the magnificent tomb dissolved in the sands of time. However, what did not vanish with destruction was the cultural legacy left by the Halicarnasso mausoleum. Through the centuries, his influence lasted, and his history became a legend that inspired future generations. For a long time, it was rumored that the wonders that decorated the grave had been stolen or dispersed, but the traces of their existence were still present in the stories of the travelers who passed through the ancient city of Halicarnasso. The history of the tomb of Mausolo lived beyond its ruin, as a testimony of human ability to create beauty and greatness. The cultural impact of the destruction of mausoleum was not limited only to the ruins, but also left a deep mark on the history of architecture and art. The later architects and sculptors looked at Halicarnasso's mausoleum as a model, an ideal to follow in the construction of funeral monuments. Many of the great mausoleums and real tombs of later times, especially in Rome and in the Byzantine Empire, reflected the monumental design of the mausoleum, taking from it the idea of a colossal structure, a truncated pyramid, and the inclusion of sculptural figures that they represented the power of the rulers. The archaeological remains of mausoleum provide a fragmented image of what was once one of the most impressive wonders of antiquity. Although there is only a small fraction of what was the original structure, archaeologists have discovered remains of the Jonic columns that supported the building, fragments of the sculptures that once adorned their facade, and some architectural details that allow reconstructing in the mind the magnificence of Mausolo's tomb. In the British Museum, for example, fragments of the reliefs and the equestrian statues that adorned the mausoleum are preserved. These fragments, although partial, are still revealing the quality and grandiosity of the work. One of the most amazing elements that has come to us of this destroyed structure are the sculptures that adorn the columns and the roof of the mausoleum. Among them, there are representations of mythological heroes, scenes of battles and divine figures that not only talked about the greatness of Mausolo and Artemisia, but also of the world in which they lived. The artistic work of these sculptors, whose hands mold such detailed figures that seem to come alive, is preserved in the pieces that, although fragmented, remain evidence of the talent and artistic mastery of the time. Beyond the material remains, Halicarnasso Mausoleum left an indelible brand in Western culture. For centuries, its name has been synonymous with great funeral monuments of human capacity to create works that transcend generations. The historical stories and the descriptions of the travelers have kept their memory alive, as if the ruins of the mausoleum still whisper in every corner of Halicarnasso their history of greatness and loss. The impact of this wonder was not only artistic, but also emotional. Each of the remains that have been found reminds us of the transience of life, but also the human yearning for eternity. Mausolo and Artemisia, who once walked through the lands that saw this monument born, today are still symbols of love and power, of sacrifice and devotion. The ruin of Mausoleum is also a reminder of the fragility of human constructions against the forces of nature and time, but, at the same time, it is a will that great artistic creations and historical moments last far beyond their physical destruction. Although today the mausoleum no longer exists in its entirety, the legacy he left has been transported throughout history, fed by the stories of those who marveled at their beauty and the archaeological fragments that have reached us. Thus, Halicarnasso Mausoleum remains a symbol of human ambition, a fundamental piece in the history of art and architecture, and a reminder that, even in death, greatness can be immortalized. The seven wonders of the ancient world, despite their diversity in terms of design and purpose, share a fundamental characteristic: their ability to amaze, inspire, and endure the collective memory of humanity. Throughout the centuries, these structures have not only witnessed the cultures that erected them, but have also symbolized the ideals, values, and aspirations of those civilizations. Although wonders were created in different contexts and with particular purposes, when examining them closely, both amazing similarities and notable differences can be found. One of the most obvious similarities is the relationship that all wonders keep with power and devotion. The pyramids of Egypt, for example, were built as tombs for the pharaohs, reflecting not only the political power of these rulers, but also their belief in life after death. Similarly, the Artemis Temple in Ephesus and the Zeus Temple in Olympia were erected as places of worship, dedicated to honor the gods of the Greek pantheon. The architects and builders of these structures faced monumental challenges, using the best technologies available to achieve colossal buildings that seemed to challenge gravity. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built with massive stone blocks, was an unparalleled engineering achievement, while Halicarnasso's mausoleum integrated intricate sculptural details in its architectural design, which made it not only a funeral monument, but also a work of art. However, despite these similarities, each wonder had a unique purpose that reflected the peculiarities of the culture that built it. The Great Pyramid, for example, was not only a grave, but an expression of Egyptian belief in eternal life. Its design and construction were a reflection of the importance given to the beyond. In contrast, the Artemisa Temple, in Ephesus, represented the religious devotion and power of a city-state that was considered protective of the goddess. While the Egyptian pyramid looked towards the future of the pharaohs, the Temple of Artemis focused on the present, on the worship of the goddess and the power of the city in the context of the Hellenic world. The Colossus of Rhodes, on the other hand, had a more symbolic purpose, representing not only Rhodes' power as one of the most important cities in the ancient world, but also the pride of a people that had defeated an invading army. Its size and location at the entrance of the port reflected the intention of impressing and showing the world the greatness of the city. Similarly, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, which stood like a monumental tower on the island of Lighthouse, an intellectual and cultural center of the ancient world. As for the materials used, the differences are notorious. Giza's pyramid was built with huge limestone blocks, while Halicarnasso Mausoleum integrated marble into its structure, which allowed a greater expression of sculptural details and decorations. The Artemisa Temple, like Zeus's, was made mainly of marble, which gave it an imposing and glorious appearance, in contrast to the stone and bronze used in the Colossus of Rhodes. The Pharaoh of Alexandria, meanwhile, was a mixture of stone, marble and bronze, materials that allowed it to remain firm for centuries, despite natural adversities. In terms of influence and legacy, some wonders left fingerprints deeper than others. The Great Pyramid, for example, remains the only wonder that persists in its original form, a testimony of perseverance and engineering of the ancient Egyptians. Its influence on architecture and popular culture endures to this day. In comparison, Halicarnasso Mausoleum, although influenced posterior funeral architecture, has left only scattered remains that are testimonies of art and the dedication of sculptors and architects of the time. The Pharaoh of Alexandria, although it no longer exists, remains a central figure in the history of navigation, and its concept of guide tower has been replicated throughout history throughout the world. Thus, although all wonders share an approach to monumentality, ambition, and devotion, each one has a specific purpose that distinguishes them. While some, such as Giza's pyramid, sought to ensure the immortality of the rulers, others, such as the Temple of Artemis and the Colossus of Rhodes, celebrated the supremacy of the city-states and their relationship with the gods. The wonders of the ancient world show us the differences in the values, technology, and beliefs of the civilizations that created them, but also teach us that, despite their particularities, they all shared the need to leave an indelible mark on history. The wonders of the ancient world, although they no longer exist in their entirety, continue to exert a powerful influence on modern culture. The majesty of these structures, which once dazzled the ancient civilizations, continues to resonate in the cinema, literature, and contemporary art, transmitting its legacy of greatness and mystery through the centuries. The fascination with these wonders has not decreased over time, but, on the contrary, it has grown, becoming an essential element for the creation of artistic and narrative works that continue to captivate the public. In the cinema, the wonders of the ancient world have been a constant source of inspiration. From classical adventure films to contemporary blockbusters, these monumental structures have been portrayed as symbols of power, mystery, and challenge. The Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, for example, has appeared in numerous cinematographic representations of ancient Greece, being one of the main locations in films about mythology and gods. The Colossus of Rhodes, meanwhile, has been the subject of great fascination in epic adventure films, such as Titan's Fury or The Legend of the Colossus, where he imagines how this gigantic statue could have dominated the horizon of the island and left an impression indelible in visitors. But it is not only in the physical representations of wonders where we find their footprint in the cinema. The symbolism of wonders, such as the pyramids of Egypt, which represent immortality, or the lighthouse of Alexandria, such as a lighthouse of hope and direction, has been used in science fiction and fantasy films. Films such as The Mummy or Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade present these monuments as focal points of mystery and adventure, associating their greatness with ancient secrets, hidden treasures, and great enigmas to solve. In literature, the wonders of the ancient world have been recurrently used as metaphors of human ambition, fall, and eternity. In historical and fantasy novels, authors such as Mary Shelley or H.G. Wells, pyramids and other ancient monuments have been used as elements that symbolize the fight against time and nature. In addition, wonders have been described as guardians of forgotten secrets, promoting the narrative towards exploration and discovery issues. The Colossus of Rhodes, for example, has been portrayed in literature as a symbol of the power of human beings to mold the world to their will, and at the same time, as a warning about the fragility of human creations against forces of nature. Beyond the narrative of adventure and science fiction, the wonders of the ancient world have deeply influenced contemporary art. Throughout the centuries, artists of all disciplines have interpreted these wonders in a unique way, often focusing on their beauty, monumentality, and the complex relationship between man and nature. The Great Pyramid of Giza, with its perfectly geometric form and its mystery air, has been a recurring theme in painting and sculpture, inspiring works that explore the contrast between the eternal and the ephemeral. The pendant gardens of Babylon, although their existence is still debated, have been recreated in art as a symbol of abundance, love, and link between humanity and the natural world. In digital art and contemporary sculpture, the wonders of the ancient world continue to serve as a source of inspiration. Modern artists have reinterpreted these structures either as photorealistic recreations or as stylized versions, which reflect the tension between the old and the modern. The pendant gardens of Babylon, for example, have been subject to impressive digital recreations that show an idealized vision of the city, while the Alexandria lighthouse has been represented in several works of art as a symbol of guide and wisdom. Wonder's legacy is also present in contemporary architectural design. Many modern architects have been inspired by the symmetry, scale, and grandiosity of the wonders of the ancient world. The pyramid, as a symbol of stability and permanence, has been a constant source of inspiration in architecture, from the designs of government buildings to museums and monuments. The Louvre Museum in Paris, with its famous glass pyramid, is just an example of how the ancient concept of the pyramid has been integrated into modern architecture. Over the centuries, the wonders of the ancient world have also been subject to reinterpretations in the philosophical and political field. The idea of wonder has been used to reflect on human nature and the relationship between civilization and nature. The pyramids of Egypt, for example, have been seen as a symbol of man's eternal struggle to leave a mark in history, while Rhodes's Colossus has been interpreted as an emblem of the human struggle against the elements and the passage weather. In music, wonder's echoes also resonate. Composers and musicians have used the names and image of the wonders of the ancient world to evoke certain feelings of greatness and astonishment. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, with its bright light by guiding the sailors, has been evoked in orchestral compositions that deal with orientation and destiny. The pyramids of Egypt, with their ancestral mystery, have been sources of inspiration for works of environmental music, seeking to capture the essence of the immutable and the eternal. In summary, the wonders of the ancient world, although crumbled for the passage of time, remain living elements in modern culture. Its influence can be seen in the way we build, imagine, and represent the world through art, cinema, and literature. These structures have not only been monuments to greatness, but remain inspirational headlights for a humanity that continues to look towards the past to find new ways to transcend time and space. The wonders of the ancient world, although all have succumbed over time and natural disasters, continue to offer valuable lessons for modern architecture. The durability, innovation, and ingenuity of the architects of antiquity continue to amaze contemporary experts, demonstrating that the structures built thousands of years ago can still inspire today's designers. Although these wonders are no longer present, what they left us, both in terms of knowledge and concepts, is a legacy that remains alive and that resonates deeply today. One of the greatest achievements of the ancient world was its ability to resist the passage of time, often in extreme conditions. The pyramids of Egypt, built more than 4,000 years ago, remain the most obvious example of durability. Despite the changes in climatic conditions, invasions, looting, and earthquakes, Giza's Great Pyramid is still standing as a testament to engineering and precise planning. Its durability teaches us that the secret of a lasting structure is not only in the materials used, but also in the understanding of geography, climate, and the relationship between humanity and its natural environment. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, another wonder that resisted the passage of time for centuries, was a milestone of engineering and navigation. Although the physical structure was destroyed by an earthquake in the 14th century, its legacy endures as a symbol of human capacity to create solutions that respond to very specific needs. Pharaoh design teaches us that architecture is not only a matter of aesthetics, but also functionality. A lighthouse not only had to be visually impressive, but also operational and useful for sailors. This balanced lesson between form and function remains key in modern architecture, where aesthetics and utility must work together harmoniously. The pendant gardens of Babylon, although their existence has been subject to controversy, also leave an important mark on the history of engineering and architecture. The ability to create an oasis in the heart of a desert city, using advanced irrigation techniques and structures from terraces that challenged gravity, it is a sample of creativity and innovation in a challenging environment. This type of engineering teaches us that architectural solutions must be adaptive and based on the deep understanding of local conditions. The use of innovative irrigation systems was not only an advance for the time, but also offers ideas on how we can address the problems of sustainability and use of water today. Another outstanding example of architectural innovation is Rhodes's Colossus, which represented not only the skill in sculpture, but also a testimony of humanity's ability to face the challenge of building on a monumental scale. Although the statue was destroyed by an earthquake, the Colossus taught that stability and resistance in large structures depend on both technique and planning. Modern construction techniques and advanced materials, such as those used for skyscrapers, must be conceived with the same attention to detail and ability to anticipate stress factors that affect the structure. Each of the wonders of the ancient world has something unique to teach us, either about the construction methods, the materials used, or the way they interact with the environment. The Great Chinese Wall, for example, reveals the importance of persistence and resilience in the creation of a monumental work. Over more than 21,000 kilometers, the wall was not only designed to be a physical barrier against invaders, but also reflected the desire of human beings to maintain control over their territory. Today, the wall reminds us that, in architecture, integration with the landscape and context is essential for the long-term success of any project. In addition, the wonders of the ancient world highlight the importance of detailed planning and organization in construction. The architects and engineers of the ancient civilizations understood the need to calculate and anticipate the materials, the forces of nature, and the implications of the use of the structure during their useful life. This strategic approach remains key in modern architecture, where long-term planning, anticipation of potential problems, and teamwork are essential to carry out ambitious and complex projects. The legacy of the wonders of the ancient world also underlines the value of technological innovation in architecture. Many of these structures were built using the tools and technologies available at the time, but the solutions that were often created are surprising even for today's standards. The advances in construction techniques and the use of durable materials were fundamental for the survival of these structures over time. Modern advances in construction technology, including new high-strength materials and automation technologies, must follow the same logic of creativity and ingenuity that characterized the architects of antiquity. Wonders also teach us that architecture is, above all, an art form, a means to express cultural values and the identity of a civilization. Each of these structures, from the pyramids of Egypt to the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, was a manifestation of power, religion, beliefs, and aspirations of its people. In modern architecture, the ability to transmit a message through the structure remains as important as functionality. From museums to government buildings, architecture remains a powerful way of telling stories and reflecting cultural identity. In short, the wonders of the ancient world are not only symbols of what was possible in the past, but also headlights that guide modern architects in their search for creative, innovative, and durable solutions. The lessons of durability, innovation, planning, and art that they read us continue to inspire and challenge future generations, reminding us that, like its creators, we can overcome obstacles and build something that resists the test of time. The wonders of the ancient world have fascinated humanity for centuries, not only for their magnitude and beauty, but also because of the mystery that surrounds them. Although most of them no longer exist in their original form, archaeological excavations over the years have allowed researchers to discover fragments of these great structures and speculate on their shape and meaning. However, each discovery is accompanied by new debates about the veracity of the ancient stories, the exact place of their location, and, above all, how those wonders were built. One of the most exciting discoveries were the finding of remains of what is believed to be the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus. Although the temple was completely destroyed by a fire and several looting over the centuries, in recent decades, archaeologists have unearthed a lot of fragments of columns and sculptures that confirm the magnificence of this temple. What has surprised experts is not only the size of the columns, but also the exquisite level of detail in the reliefs of the sculptures. The findings allow us to assume that the Temple of Artemis was one of the most impressive structures of its time, but what has also generated controversy is the discussion about whether the current temple was in the same place as the original. Some experts argue that the remains found correspond to a more recent reconstruction of the temple, while others defend that they are vestiges of the true Temple of Artemis. The case of the Pendant Gardens of Babylon is another that has challenged the borders of archaeology and history. Many scholars have questioned the very existence of the gardens, with the theory that ancient stories could have been exaggerated or even invented. Despite the mentions in ancient sources such as those of Herodotus and Byzancio, no clear vestige of the gardens has been found in the current Iraq. However, at the end of the 19th century, some archaeologists made excavations in the ruins of Babylon, where they discovered remains of large irrigation systems that could have been used for the irrigation of gardens. Although these remains do not offer conclusive evidence that the hanging gardens existed as described in the stories, they do suggest that the city of Babylon was a place of great advance in hydraulic engineering, capable of creating large green spaces in a desert environment. As for the Alexandria Lighthouse, archaeological explorations have been less fruitful in terms of finding physical remains of the monument, since most of the structure was destroyed by earthquakes over the centuries. However, in recent years, archaeologists have identified a series of stone blocks that are believed to have belonged to the lighthouse, and underwater studies have also been carried out in the area to try to locate the submerged remains. The most recent discoveries suggest that the lighthouse was much larger and more complex than the ancient stories indicate. The structures found underwater seem to confirm that the lighthouse not only served as a guide for navigators, but also played a role as a monumental platform, with a series of statues and decorative elements that would have embellished the port of Alexandria. Halicarnasso Mausoleum is another wonder that has been the subject of extensive archaeological exploration, and although the remains of Mausoleum are only fragments of what was once, the excavations have revealed a surprising architectural design. Over the centuries, the mausoleum was looted, and its impressive sculpture and art were destroyed, but some of the statues and reliefs that adorn the building are still preserved. Recent research has revealed that the structure was designed by several architects, and the sculptures were made by renowned artists such as Escas and Praxiteles. Archaeologists continue to work on the site, looking for more pieces that can help reconstruct how Mausoleum looked at the peak. Despite the advances in excavation, the debate on the original appearance of Mausoleum and architectural influences that could have had in the design of other monumental tombs in the ancient world persists. The recent advances in the excavations of the Colossus of Rhodes have also opened new paths for archaeological research. Although the Colossus was destroyed by an earthquake in 226 BC, archaeologists have made important discoveries about the foundations of the statue. In 2008, a team of underwater archaeologists identified fragments of the Colossus base in the port of Rhodes, which allowed new reconstructions on the size and shape of the statue. Despite the emotion that this finding has generated, the exact location of the statue and its appearance remains the subject of debate. Some argue that the Colossus was larger than it had been estimated above, while others claim that the figure never reached the monumental size that the ancient writers described. The last great mystery is the Great Chinese Wall, which extends along thousands of kilometers and is one of the best-known monuments in the world. For decades, archaeologists have been investigating the exact route of the wall, since the original construction routes have been clear. Recently, fragments of wall have been found in unexplored areas, which has revealed details of its construction. These findings suggest that the wall was built in phases and that many sections were altered or rebuilt over time. The exploration has made it clear that the Great Wall was not only a defense wall, but also a symbol of the resistance and perseverance of a civilization. Despite all advances in archaeology, the wonders of the ancient world are still an enigma in many ways. Recent discoveries have revealed fragments of these imposing structures, but the true magnitude of what they represented is still a subject of speculation. The debates about authenticity, location, and design of wonders have not only enriched our understanding of the past, but also reminded us of how fragile is our collective memory and how, through archaeology, we try to rebuild what once existed in his greatness. In a world full of amazing wonders, from the majesty of the pyramids of Egypt to the Colossus of Rhodes that monitored the port of the island, the fascination with the great constructions of antiquity has not stopped growing. Over the centuries, the wonders of the ancient world, officially recognized as 7 in the famous list of Antipatro de Sidon, have left an indelible legacy. However, there is an intriguing question that resonates in the minds of historians, archaeologists, and dreamers: what could have been the 8th wonder of the ancient world? The absence of an 8th wonder in the list has left us with a void full of possibilities and speculation. Some theories point to monuments that, although they were not included in the official list, stood out for their enormous cultural and architectural impact in the ancient world. These structures, at the time, were so imposing that they could have been easily considered an 8th wonder if the concept of wonder would have been more flexible. Over the years, oral stories, traveler stories, and archaeology have thrown light on some of these potential candidates. One of the first places that is usually mentioned when talking about the 8th wonder is the famous Zeus temple in Olympia, in Greece. Although the monumental statue of Zeus was part of one of the recognized wonders, some argue that the temple itself, due to its size and magnificence, could have been considered a wonder in itself. With its majestic columns and its imposing presence in the center of the Olympic Games, this temple was a symbol of the power of the gods and the greatness of Greek civilization. The remains of its structure still amazed archaeologists, because in their time it was one of the largest constructions in the world. Another monument that has generated debates about its possible inclusion in the list is the Knossos Palace on the island of Crete. This palatial complex, home of the Minoan civilization, presented a unique design, with colorful large corridors and a complex network of tunnels. Archaeologists who have worked in the palace have praised the sophistication of their construction, which included innovations such as drainage and running water that were not seen anywhere else in the ancient world. His influence lasted beyond his time, since many of the architectural elements of Knossos were imitated by later cultures. On the shore of the Nile, in Egypt, it has also been suggested that the Karnak temple could have been one of the unrecognized wonders. This religious complex, one of the greatest in the world, was dedicated to the god Amun-Ra and was extended by several pharaohs over the centuries. With its gigantic columns and its intricate reliefs, the Karnak temple is one of the greatest samples of Egyptian architecture. His immensity and his cultural impact on Egypt have made him one of the most important archaeological sites in the world, and many believe he deserved a place in the wonders list of the ancient world. The Susa Bridge in Persia, a bridge that crossed the Ulai River in the old Persian capital of Susa, has also been indicated as a possible eighth wonder. The old stories mention that this bridge was a wonder of engineering, being one of the greatest structures of its time. Although there have been no important archaeological remains of this bridge, historians agree that if it had been preserved, it could have been considered a wonder of architecture due to its complexity and functionality. Of course, there are those who argue that the Chinese Wall, with its majestic journey through thousands of kilometers, could have been the eighth wonder of the ancient world, even before the Mule LLA will reach the extension it currently has. In ancient times, the wall was already an engineering feat and a resistance and unit symbol for the Chinese people. Its construction required a monumental effort, and its presence throughout the mountains and valleys made it impossible not to see it as a wonder of humanity. But ideas about the eighth wonder are not limited only to physical constructions. Some scholars believe that the eighth wonder could have been a work of art or an ephemeral monument that disappeared over the centuries. Maybe it was a wooden temple or a bronze statue that did not resist the passage of time. Or even, it could have been an event in itself, the celebrations in the Colosseum of Rome, the banquets of the palace of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, or the original Olympic Games of Greece, which, although they are not permanent constructions, reflected the grandeur of the civilization and could have been seen as a wonder in their time. It is possible that the eighth wonder of the ancient world has never existed in a physical form, but has been a symbol of what humanity could have achieved at the time. Perhaps it was not only a monumental structure, but a testament to creativity, ingenuity, and human spirit that, even today, continues to inspire entire generations to build, dream, and achieve what seemed impossible. In the search for the eighth wonder, what highlights is the eternal fascination of humanity for what is left behind. The wonders of the ancient world, although many of them no longer exist, remain a lighthouse that guides us towards our own understanding of art, science, and spirituality. What could have been the eighth wonder may not find an official list, but it is still alive in our collective memory, inviting us to imagine how great it could have been and what we can still build. From the first astonishment before the majestic pyramids of Egypt to the Colossus that erected over the port of Rhodos, the wonders of the ancient world were not only great structures of their time, but also left an indelible mark on human thought and in the culture that endures to this day. The fascination with these works has only grows, fed by the mystery of its construction, the symbolism they contained, and their ability to transcend times. The impact of wonders on human thought can be seen in the way they have influenced generations of philosophers, artists, engineers, and architects. The construction of these monuments was not only an engineering and creativity feat, but also a tangible manifestation of the beliefs and aspirations of ancient civilizations. Each of the wonders reflected a deep sense of the divine, the eternal, and the sublime. Giza's pyramid, for example, was not only designed as the tomb of a pharaoh, but also represented the connection between the earthly world and the cosmos. Its construction was impregnated with a deep spirituality, reflected in its alignment with the stars and their mathematical proportion. The engineering behind her was not only a physical achievement, but also an act of devotion and symbolism that deeply impacted religious and scientific thinking of the time. Wonders also played a crucial role in the evolution of architecture and design. The Artemisa Temple in Ephesus, with its grandiosity and artistic details, not only showed the skill of the Greek architects, but also inspired generations of artists to dream of the monumental. The complexity of the structures and the ability to integrate artistic and functional elements were revolutionary. The columns, the statues, and the friezes were not only ornaments, but an integral part of the message they wanted to transmit, joining aesthetics with spirituality. These elements were absorbed by later cultures, which continued to develop their own monumental architecture, such as the Colosseum of Rome, which inherited the spirit of the Greek wonder in its form and functionality. The influence of the wonders of the ancient world also extends to philosophy and art. The constant search for perfection and beauty in these structures led the thinkers of antiquity to reflect on the purpose of human life and the relationship with the divine. Plato, Aristotle, and other Greek philosophers were influenced by the mathematical and geometric principles that governed the construction of wonders, which in turn inspired rational and scientific thinking. In art, the representations of wonders, both in sculptures and in literary stories, showed the gods, heroes, and civilizations at their maximum splendor, creating an enduring image of humanity as a species capable of alcanza the sublime. Wonders became a kind of mirror of human aspiration, a reflection of what could be achieved with ingenuity, talent, and determination. But the legacy of wonders is not only tangible in intellectual and artistic aspects. He also left a deep mark on popular culture, in the way in which humanity looks at the world and relates to the extraordinary. Wonders were, and they are still, a source of astonishment and inspiration. Throughout the centuries, travelers, writers, and artists have tried to capture the magnificence of these monuments through words and painting, turning them into symbols of glory, ambition, and human fragility. The representations of wonders in literature, cinema, and modern art continue to evoke powerful emotions in the spectators, transporting them at a time when humanity aspired to great, the eternal. Even today, when monuments no longer exist or only are ruins, their fascination power is still intact. Throughout history, the idea of the wonders of the world has been reinterpreted on multiple occasions. With the passing of the centuries, new wonders have been added, adapted to the realities and aspirations of different eras. However, the original wonders remain the standard against which all subsequent creations are measured. They are, in many ways, the first global monuments, which not only unify the cultures of the past, but also teach us, the inhabitants of the modern world, the value of greatness, creativity, and collective effort. They remind us that, despite cultural and geographical differences, human beings share a common need to create something that transcends time, something that is recorded in the memory of future generations. Perhaps the most surprising thing about the wonders of the ancient world is its ability to connect humanity through the centuries. In a world full of changes, wars, and destruction, these structures remain headlights that illuminate the way to a past full of astonishment and admiration. They are proof of what humanity is able to achieve when it joins to create something truly great. And although many of them no longer exist, their influence is still alive, not only in the remains of its ruins, but in each of us, that we continue to dream of the impossible and looking towards the future with the hope that our own wonders, they are still a source of inspiration for those who will come later. In the vast tapestry of human history, the wonders of the ancient world rise as immortal symbols of what humanity is capable of achieving when it faces extraordinary challenges. Although the passage of time, natural forces, and wars have reduced these majestic structures to ruins, the spirit of each is still alive, embodied in our collective memory and in the legacy they have left behind. The message that these wonders transmit to us is clear and resonant. We are not only able to create the sublime, but we have the responsibility of preserving our history, our achievements, and our aspirations. Today, more than ever, we face the need to preserve our cultural heritage, to understand the fragility of what we have built, and commit ourselves to protect what remains a testimony of our potential. Each ruin, each monument, each artifact that remains is a window to the past, a tangible connection with those who came before us and that, with their own hands, shape the great ideas that inspire us even today. Just as the wonders of the ancient world survived the passage of the centuries, we must ensure that what we have created today can be appreciated and understood by the coming generations. Like the Great Pyramids of Egypt or the Pharaoh of Alexandria, our own creations, although sometimes they seem ephemeral or temporal, have the power to transcend time if we are careful in how we preserve them. The act of preserving is not only a matter of protecting stones and metals, but also keeping dreams, ideas, and aspirations that those monuments represent alive. Each wonder, whether physical or conceptual, is a reflection of our ability to dream big and to create something that transcends our own mortality. The history of the wonders of the ancient world teaches us that, despite adversities, losses, and ruins, what really endures is the human ability to imagine, create, and leave a legacy. In this sense, the the preservation of our history is not only an act of reverence towards the past, but a way to ensure that our own contributions to humanity can be valued by those who are yet to come. Thus, when looking at the villas of the past, we remember not only the greatness of the civilizations that erected them, but also the imperative to continue building and preserving in the present for generations of the future. The eternity of wonders does not reside solely in the stones that compose them, but in the human spirit that inspired them. And that spirit, the desire to leave a lasting mark, must remain alive in us, motivating us to protect, preserve and honor everything we have created, with the hope that, one day, our own wonders will also be part of the legacy of the humanity.